Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.
Give me one second. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Gaggle at the Glen, a one-off special event held here at the Watkins Glen circuit. Indeed, a one-off special in preparation for the official iRacing event coming in a weekend's time, where we'll be seeing GT3s and LMP2 machines go racing at what is an absolutely sensational circuit based in the United States of America. One of the founding homes of motorsport racing in the United States, and we're going to be seeing over the course of 2 hours of racing today, drivers going toe-to-toe and looking to stand the best of the rest in a race which, whilst there's no points up for grabs, it is the case that everybody will be looking to try and assert a little bit of pace over their peers, for the simple reason that it's a one-off special, but always there is a bit of competition out on the circuit. In the commentary booth you have myself, Paul TX141 Walsh, alongside Andy Thompson. Andy, how are you doing today?
I'm good, and yeah, really looking forward to this. Watkins Glen, a track I love on iRacing. Really good racing between these two types of cars on this track. So it's going to be a really interesting race for the next 2-hour race that's coming up. It's going to be interesting as well, you know. It's the time of day and the heat of the track. It's good preparation for the actual 6-hour event. So really looking forward to what's coming up.
Oh, indeed. And as our drivers are getting themselves set at the moment for a 10-minute qualifying session, which is only moments away, there's going to be a number of challenges, albeit we won't be seeing challenges in qualifying per se, for the simple reason that each of our drivers will have 3 solo qualifying laps. And that will mean, as a result, they'll have the opportunity to be able to put laps in by themselves with no interference, no having to worry, if you're in a GT3 car, for example, of having to give way to an LMP2 that may be coming up behind you, and vice versa, the LMP2s not being interfered with in terms of their laps by the GT3s. And in that solo qualifying session, it'll be about going as fast as possible with no pressure on you, and therefore it's the case it gives a driver an ample opportunity to set the best lap. In your opinion, Andy, when you have those qualifying sessions, solo qualifying and all filled out there, what's your preference?
It depends what car you're in, I suppose. If you're in an LMP2, you want to be in a solo qualifying, because obviously you can get compromised by the GT3 cars going around this track. But certainly as a GT3, you want that slipstream effect. But what it does do, it makes a plain level field of qualifying. So then what we will have is just pure out speed and see who's the fastest out on track to get that speed in place. So 3 laps, like you said. So they do have a few laps if they do mess up. And this track is one for easily getting them off track. Certainly going down into the inner loop as you come up through the S's. That's always a prime spot for getting that off track. Pesky little off track on the lap, but that's down to the drivers to make sure that they actually overcome that and try and get the best lap in. So it's going to be all out as we start seeing some of the times coming in. P. Gannon coming with a 1:32.405, and obviously in the GT3s we got a 1:42.611 with Posma. So some times coming in at the moment. So we'll see who comes out of top of the pile on the LMP2s and GT3s.
Oh, indeed. And this circuit, of course, has the major challenge in the fact that it's such a fast circuit, given the fact that you do have the run all the way from the right-angled corner of turn at number 1 up to the bus stop chicane, and with the bus stop chicane being one of those segments whereby you're looking to carry as much speed as humanly possible. But in doing so, there is that challenge. If you hit a curve too high, it can launch the car, and at the same time, don't take enough speed in, and you lose out major lap time. And then the second half of the lap moves from being very high speed and high intensity, high risk, high reward, to a lap which then suddenly converts into one that's all about technicality and nailing a series of wide back-to-back hairpins before concluding on a set of sweepers that completes the lap. And, well, one of those situations, I think, Andy, where our drivers will be put to the test in multiple regards. What's, in your opinion, the part of the circuit where our drivers are going to be most fearful or perhaps most on edge?
I suppose it's coming down into the boot, coming down the chute into turn number 6, going down there up into the toe. You know, it's a treacherous place of the course, the track. And these LMP2 cars coming around here are really quick. So if you're in a GT3 car and you've got an LMP2 coming fast up behind you, then that's certainly going to be one of the areas. Another, obviously, prime location is that inner loop that I mentioned before. It's a really tricky part of the circuit, and if you're going too wide into that corner, you're going to be risking making a spin or actually getting hit off the track there. So they're probably the two bits of the circuit that I think are going to be the most interesting. And always you got the treacherous turn number 1 for that first lap. You know, you always see sort of instant. You wouldn't think so though, because it is quite a sweeping right-hand circuit, or turn, sorry. So, but luckily they do have a large runoff area, but hopefully all the cars make it through on that first lap.
Oh, indeed. And as our drivers right now making their way on around here, and this is in the final warm-up practice session, if you will, where the fact they do have roughly 2.5 minutes still left on the clock. And right now we have our drivers making their way on around all together. And it will be a bit of a change of dynamic. But as you say there, with the multiple challenges around the circuit, it was going to be the case that each and every driver will be looking to do their utmost. In terms of the cars we have available today, the variety of GT3 and also LMP2 class machinery, albeit a bit more variety in the GT3s by comparison. And we're just looking at Timothy Bray there, the team upstate driver, who just jumped to the pits running the BMW M4. We've also got quite a few Mercedes AMGs out on the circuits. And as we see some of our drivers continue to roll on around here, we can see Kenneth McGrath in the Snowman LMP2 machine coming across that timeline to set a practice lap. But it is the case that everyone looking to get firm. But in terms of our classes here, which cars, in your opinion, Andy, are we looking at that could be perhaps some of the ones to really watch out for? The ones where it's going to be perhaps a dominant car? Starting off with the GT3s.
Yeah, I mean, you can't look further than the BMW, very fast around this track. You got long straight, which is primarily open for the BMW cars. The Lamborghinis are very good all-rounder cars, so I expect them to be really good and catch up sort of after the inner loop when you get the more technical part of the circuit coming down into the chute, the toe, the heel up to the end of the lap. But that BMW front power will be certainly the one to watch going through turn 1, up through the S's and on the rundown into the inner loop. So certainly the BMW car to look, but the Lamborghini is always a good choice of car to have.
Oh, indeed. And as we're seeing here, Alex Persian in the Moradness QNTM squad machine making his way through some of the very last corners here, rolling up the hill now into what is the very tricky left-hander between the last two. It is the case that Persian, we ride on board and have to really siphon the steering wheel in that Mercedes AMG. And well, it is the case, of course, Mercedes recently seen a new boon to their entries in the GT3 class in iRacing. The fact we've seen the arrival of the 2020 Evo machine. And as Persian gradually making his way on out. I do have to ask, with the introduction of the new GT3 car, it's one of those cases, are we going to be seeing a GT3 that's perhaps a little bit overperforming or hasn't quite been aligned with the balance of performance yet? Or is it the case we're feeling that actually it's been brought on in? My gut would say that it's been balanced in quite well already, given the fact that the iRacing guys, the developers behind, do put a lot of effort into making sure the classes are equal. But your thoughts, Andy?
Yeah, definitely. That Mercedes is a lot of people are raving about it, saying it's good, a bit of a beast to look after. But it'd be interesting to see how it goes on in this race here today. A brand new car, not a lot of setups for it, which is probably the biggest downfall for the drivers trying to decide to drive it. It is going to be that setup. So unless you're very good at doing setups off the cuff, I suppose it's going to be quite hard.
Oh, indeed. And well, one thing we haven't talked about so far as we transition from practice to our qualifying session, this gives our drivers, of course, the opportunity to get set and have their initial warm-up laps before putting in those 3 timed solo laps, is that this session today being run by the FindingSpeed League and being put on by them in preparation for the official iRacing event in a week's time. Very kind of the FindingSpeed League, and an absolutely brilliant title for the session known as Gaggle at the Glen. And I must say, we've got quite a good number of GT3 drivers who are making their way to the circuit tonight, but we are quite limited in LMP2 drivers at the moment, and we are hoping that some more LMP2s are able to arrive. But if not, I'm sure there's still going to be some great battling in the LMP2 classes all the same, despite the fact we've got quite a limited group of drivers. But I think right now, whilst Andy's just had to briefly step away for a brief moment, I think just a case of a bit of a quick bathroom break there. It does happen, we all get caught short. I've been there a number of times in the commentary booth myself. Here's the case right now, we are looking at some of our drivers making their way on around, and we do have one of our Ferrari 488 GT3s, the RPM racing machine there of what is, unless I'm very much mistaken, Brad Crouch, making his way right now through the latter half a lap here and building on up in that Evo machine. And that Ferrari, very agile, particularly in those medium speed apex corners, does have a rather nice rear end which does slide around, but as he makes his way on through, it is the case right now building up to that big lap. And I think we do very shortly have Andy coming on back into the room. And Andy, are you there?
I am. I'm just having a few technical difficulties at the moment, but I'm trying to resolve it as we can see. So yeah, I will be with you.
Alrighty, no problems, Andy. Well, whilst those technical issues are being resolved, and just those minor little issues that do obviously plague us every so often, and it is the way, of course, with computers and technology these days, we are with Brad Crouch as he makes his way towards the end of a warm-up lap, and now coming onto a flying lap here, and we're going to be staying with him as he makes his way on around, and let's give you an insight as we ride on board. So as he comes out the final corner here, going up through the gearbox, trying to get the highest possible speed down to turn number 1, up into 5th gear, and now building all the way down to the braking zone for turn number 1, coming down the gearbox here, coming all the way down to approximately 84 miles an hour on apex before 3rd gearing, and now all the way up to the bus stop chicane. Accelerating up the hill and charging on towards turn number 4. It is the case completely flat out here, no hesitation, rolling through turns 2, 3, and now up towards the chicane and getting ready to brake. It is going to be the case that from 6th gear, the high speed's being reached here, and now braking into that bus stop chicane, and you'll see coming down to 5th gear, down to 4th, just gradually trailing in and using those downshifts to try and retard the car, but at the same time being very straight on the steering wheel as he now rolls his way through the downhill right-hander that empties out from the bus stop chicane, and now going on to what is essentially the boot part of the circuit. We run the full variant here, and as he rolls his way down in 3rd gear here, getting on the power nice and early, and now heading in towards the uphill braking zone as we make our way into the final portion of the lap. And running through another 3rd gear apex here, and you can see this back-to-back collection of effective hairpins, and which is about to conclude, if you will, with another downhill right-hander. But before we get there, we've got a nice long back straight here coming up to 5th gear, heading up to 140 mile an hour, just shy of it before braking all the way down to 2nd gear. The circuit tightening and having to be very wary of those track limits. There's a lot of runoff areas, but those track limits can be very punishing. Now rolling through the left-hander, the left-hander that precedes the double back, the left into right, which completes the lap, and accelerating on out, heading up into 4th gear, up into 5th, and just gradually balancing the throttle here, trying not to go back into 4th, and now rolling through the final corner, having to downshift to 4th gear, and exiting out here, and getting on the power nice and early, and just missing the wall there, and our cameraman getting a great shot of just how close our drivers get to the wall, and even closer when they're not on a banker lap, and Crouch there setting a good time to kick off with, albeit 1.1 seconds off of Castile, who currently is our original pole sitter, but we've only got a couple of times on the board in the GT3 class. We've still got plenty more to come on in. I do believe believe it is the case that our LMP2 drivers, by comparison, are yet to put in those lap times, but we are seeing right now in this qualifying session plenty of time. Indeed, 10 minutes. Our LMP2s in particular will have the ability to set laps much more rapidly compared to our GT3s. So I think our LMP2 drivers right now just patiently waiting and building on up as they roll their way on through the corners. But Brad Crouch here really delivering the goods. And we're focusing on Brad Crouch still, the RPM racing driver. And then we do look over to Alex Persian here. And now we're looking at the Mercedes AMG Evo driver. And will the AMG driver make his way up onto a lap here, as we're hearing also Mark Fletcher currently going provisional pole on a 42.793, and Alex Persian, the Moradnis QNTM squad driver, absolutely hammering it all the way up towards the bus stop chicane. And as he rolls his way through the corners, Persian just looking very smooth right now and heading down into the downhill drop coming out of the bus stop chicane and rolling on through. And that AMG looking very composed here, it must be said. But we do typify the fact that the front engine rear wheel drive GT3s look very stable, but I'll tell you one car that will look stable, but behind the cockpit it may be a different story. It is the LMP2 Dallara P217 machine with Corey Cook behind the wheel, the Guardian Esports machine, as he goes onto a second flying lap here after setting his first flying lap of 33.1. And our Dallara drive's now starting to put some lap times in as he makes his way up towards the bus stop chicane. And in charging on through here, we'll see with the amount of downforce these machines carry, plus all the speed, very light cars as well. They're very sensitive to the curbs through the bus stop chicane. And as he rolls his way on down, the Guardian Esports driver, they're making it look like clockwork. It's very straightforward there, but I can assure you it's anything but. Cook having put in a lot of practice, indeed all the drivers having put in a lot of practice and time and effort at the Watkins Glen circuit, and making his way down towards one of the last hairpins on this circuit. In fact, the very last hairpin, if you will, is the case that Cook looking good at the moment as he rolls on around, albeit a little bit of a snap, a bit of a snap on the nose there coming out of the hairpin. The car just not wanting to settle down. I think Cook having to fight with the steering wheel, and that's not what you want in these qualifying laps. You want the car to be free flying as he rolls his way through the downhill right-hander and now heading up into the last three corners. And as he goes through the left-hander here is the case, looking smooth as he comes on through. But as Cook now heading in towards what is the last two corners here, it is the case Guardian Esports driver making his way on through. In terms of his sectors, well, it's the case that right now Cook not looking to improve, although if he's going to do it, it'll be in the final sector. And as he comes to that time line, he's currently P2 in the class behind Nin, and as he crosses the line, Cook does not improve, and I think it was that little moment that just cost him. As we just check on in, Andy, are you back with us?
I am indeed. I managed to sort out my little technical problem, and thanks for holding the fort there, mostly there, Paul. But yeah, I mean, it's great with these cars as we watch Mark Fletcher coming through. You just see the bounce. I think the good thing with the BMW and why it is so good around here at Watkins Glen is that it's really good on the suspension. You know, you can take a few more bumps and grinds in the BMW than you can in any of the other GT3 cars. I mean, the Lamborghini, you hit a curb, you really feel it. But as we can watch Mark here, when he goes over the curbs, the car really absorbs them higher curbs coming around here in Watkins Glen. And there is a lot of high curbs that can catch you out here, but Mark on a bit of a flyer here, coming down the back straight here, coming towards the heel. Very technical part of the circuit. You've got to be brave on the braking to try and get the car put in, taking that inside line. But the good thing with Watkins in the new layout, as you see Mark taking the line there, is you can go over the curb on the exit and you do not get an off track here. So you'll see a lot of the drivers using that racing line when they're coming around here. So great as we watch Mark coming around the last corner, turn number 10, and into the tricky turn 11. It's over 11 as we see Mark as he's actually going into the pits, I think there. Yes. So it's very tricky, that last corner. It's where you can gain a lot of time on this track. You know, you come in out of the corner of turn number 10, round up, trying to get up into fourth gear. And then you need to come down into third gear for that last corner, but hit it really high revs. Literally go out wide. You're almost going to be looking like you're going to be hitting the wall on the outside of that last turn. But them curbs miraculously actually keep the car coming into the track as we watch there. That's a perfect line there from Callum, literally coming right out and scratching that wall on the outside. And pretty much that is the line for that last corner to get that maximum speed on the qualifying lap and in the race.
Oh, indeed, and very good insights there from yourself, Andy, as we see Callum Puddicombe parking up there, the Altitude Esports driver. I think it's the case his qualifying session may be at its end. We've only got just shy of a minute left on the clock here, and just checking with regards to our timing data is the case. I think most of our drivers now have put in laps, and indeed all 3 laps. We have got a couple of drivers still to finish off their laps, including Alan Mystic, for example, from Mystic Turtles, who right now is out there on a lap, but I believe it may be the situation as we do cut to Alan Mystic here, the Mystic Turtles driver. Indeed, quite the interesting team. I do like it, I must say. But round around in the BMW M4 as they make their way all the way down towards turn number 7, down into what's known as the toe corner, because it is, of course, as part of the boot loop, and it is where the toes would be if we were looking at a real life shoe or a set of steel toe caps. But as Alan Mystic comes on down here, not the strongest qualifying session here, currently 2.7 seconds off of the provisional pole set by Mark Fletcher, and I think it's the case that Mystic will get this one last lap in, but it's not going to be many more after this. I think he's got one more lap available to him, but of course once we do hit that 10-minute marker, it is a cut-off, and in fact he may not even make it to the finish line here to finish this lap. It's going to be very close. I don't think he's going to make it, Andy.
No, it doesn't look like it. I mean, it's 10 seconds left. He's going to forget. Oh, it goes extremely wide down into turn number 10. Putting all on the line here is Alan. He might, it depends on iRacing. It's very finicky. Sometimes it will let you finish. No, it will not let you finish. Literally just in front of the line.
Oh, indeed, very unfortunate there for Alan Mystic, and that is the conclusion of the qualifying session, and now we are getting ready for the race, and we grid in very shortly for what is 2 hours of racing here. And well, why are we doing 2 hours in particular? That's the big question some of you may be asking right now in tuning in. It is the case that it's 2 hour solo drive for all of our drivers, and that is a perfect emulation of a double stint in the real 24 hours of Watkins Glen. And what our drivers will be taking to the grid with 100% fuel, and they will of course have the official BOP from the iRacing special event that comes around next weekend. A lot of people will be getting ready for. And one other thing to consider with regards to, we're talking earlier, Andy, about track limits. 15 X's or 15 instant points will lead to a drive-through penalty, and another drive-through penalty for every 8 additional instant points racked up. Are we expecting quite a few drive-throughs?
I think so. This is one of them tracks that you can easily get the off tracks on. I mean, turn 1, they've made it a little bit easier now, because obviously you've just got to make sure that you hit the barrier on the, not the barrier, the curb on the left hand side as you go in. You won't get an off track. If you go past that curb, you get an off track in turn number 1. But certainly that inner loop can actually catch a lot of drivers out for the off tracks, and that's where you get the biggest slowdown as well, coming out of the loop. If you miss and cut the track on the inside, you get a really big slowdown on that. So the drivers just need to be aware of where they're positioning, and certainly going into the inner loop, and obviously turn number 1. But it's going to be interesting to find out what's going on in there, and if all the cars get through. But with the smaller grid, it should be okay.
Indeed, and well, as our drivers right now are getting set to go, I believe we will have a full formation lap, and that will give our drivers plenty of opportunity to be able to get their tyres warmed up and get set to go racing. Of course, our LMP2s starting ahead of the GT3s, and whilst we are waiting for the build-up with regards to going racing, that manual double fold rolling start as the gridding procedure is complete, will our drive, how, in your opinion, Andy, when you're out on the grid here at Watkins Glen, given the fact that you haven't got the longest of formation laps, even with the full lap, but you do have some time to warm up the tyres and whatnot, what's your focus as a driver here on this formation lap?
I think it's just getting yourself in the set mindset, and just getting yourself ready for that first corner, because that's going to be the vital corner. That there's a lot of incidents that happen here in iRacing on that corner, so you just need to make sure that you're getting it. You need that really good exit out of the last corner to be able to make sure that you can get that good run down here into turn 1. But you've really got to think, you know, tyres are going to be cold on that first lap. I can't really push it, but I need to be competitive. So it's all about conserving them tyres, warming them tyres up to get up to full temperatures, which is going to take around about a lap to do on these cars.
Indeed, and we should point out, ladies and gentlemen, that we are aware of the sound issues that have been occurring since the start of this broadcast, and we do apologise for those. We are currently in the process of rectifying those, and indeed the back-end team right now working furiously, so we are going to get those sound issues fixed as soon as possible. But as our grid make their way on around, it is the case we take you through the grid order for the Gaggle at the Glen community race. Starting on pole is Quoting in from Divided by Zero Motorsports, and he'll be joined on the front row by Corey Cook from Guardian Esports. Then Kenneth McGrath and Patrick Gannon on row number 2. The Snowman driver ahead of RPM Racing. We then have Brett Accord leading off in P5 there. The last are LMP2 class machine drivers. And then it'll be the case starting on pole in the GT3 class, Mark Fletcher for, I believe, Altitude Esports, starting ahead of Cameron Colverell and Wayne Castile. And it's the case of Sim Racing Grid driver ahead of Moradnes QTNM squad's driver, with Martin Tijhoff from T-Post Racing from the Netherlands, P9, starting alongside Callum Puddicombe, P10 from Altitude Esports. We then have Chris Gooch from Mystic Turtle starting at P11, with Timothy Bray from Team Upstate starting at P12. And then behind them on what will be the 7th row, it is the case we will have what is Timothy Bray. Well, in fact, Timothy Bray there as they make the way in front. I think he right now with Scott Angelo, in fact, my apologies. Scott Angelo will be starting alongside with Alex Persian on row number 7 as they continue to make the way on through. And then we will have David Flanagan from RPM Racing with Baron Glover alongside the privateer as we make our way down. The graphic is updated and we do see there we also have Adam Hedgecock starting P16, Baron Glover P17, Brad Crouch P18, Austin Dilt P19 from Sapphire Simsport, with Dan Ocrazana from Nitro Racing Team P20, Andrew Thompson, in fact, not setting a lap in the LMP2 machine. He's going to have to come his way through from P21, Alan Mystic P22, Brandon Lover P23, and then Brian Hoffam in P24. And I believe that is our grid for the purposes of this race. Well, Andy, we're only a couple of corners away. We're almost ready to go racing.
We certainly are. It's going to be a really interesting race. Only a small grid, so it should be nice compact. But we saw with the qualifying times, they were all really close together as we watch in the GT3s at the moment. LMP's just up the road, giving that nice little gap between the two, just in case any incidents do happen in that first corner. As always is the way with these GT3s, as the LMPs just go around the last corner here. So it's now over to the car number 17 to take the lead, and he's gone early. He's taken a jump over the second place driver, left the field waiting, really. Got there second, third and fourth, all close together as the gap just closes up nicely. But that was a great start there for the number 17 car on the LMPs. But we'll be going to the GT3s, hopefully for the start of that, which will be starting up very shortly.
Indeed, as we see here, the battle for the lead of the LMP2 class side by side between Corey Cook and Quentin as they make the way on in. I believe Cook is going to try and go around the outside to inside. He gets it done in the first run through the bus stop chicane. They're very brave as Nin out of position and now under pressure from Patrick Gannon after getting the drop on the field at the start. As you say, Andy, now it's the case of the Divided by Zero Motorsports driver really having difficulty as they roll their way down the hill and as they make the way on through. We look to the GT3s now, and it is Wayne Castile who is leading as they make the way through turn number 5 and down towards turn number 6, and behind them we do see that everybody lining up as they roll their way on through. We're focusing on Mark Fletcher here, running P3 in the GT3 class. It's just behind. You can see there is that battle there between Persian and Bray as they make their way through, and I think it's Persian who's getting ahead as they make their way into the toe hairpin and rolling on through here. Mark Fletcher losing 2 places since the start, and well, he will not be happy with the fact he's lost some places, but he'll also be very patient here as the Altitude Esports driver goes in hot pursuit of the drivers in front of him, and they make their way down towards what is turn number 8, and as they roll the way on through right now, we see already closing up to the back of what is there. In fact, it's the case, I believe we just had a bit of an update on our time boards, and it does say we've got Alan Mystic ahead, but I can't quite see Alan Mystic there on the road, so I think that might be a slight glitch unless I'm very much mistaken. But still, Mark Fletcher battling on through as they all come towards the end of that, and indeed Alan Mystic I think has already had a major moment, and it seems like he's a little bit out of sync.
It certainly does. A big incident there happened. Obviously looked at the bonnet minute, so we'll have a look what happened here. I think that's coming up to the S's, coming down onto that area, and this is what I was saying. Oh, he gets a little nudge from the Ferrari in front of him coming down onto the inner loop, and unfortunately hits the barrier really hard, and that'll put pay to his race, certainly with the speed of the rest of the drivers around him. So he's going to have a long race ahead of him, but Alan, as I know from the GT Trophy series on Apex, is one to keep it going, and you never know what's going to happen around a 2-hour race around Watkins Glen.
Oh, indeed. And I was getting slight flashbacks there to the quite recent 24 Hour of Le Mans, the contact between some of the LMP2 machines and the GTE Corvette at the time in terms of that little tap and how it ended up with a driver having to come to the pits. But fortunately, in this instance, our driver Alan Mystic not having to retire from the race, coming in for the repair work on the car. But we now focus back to live pictures and to Quoknin, who, as he makes his way down into the braking zone here for turn number 8, and now ahead and behind, I believe, unless I'm very much mistaken, that is well, in fact, that is Patrick Gannon. It's the case that Quentin has retaken the lead here, and it looks as though Cook is a bit out of sync on our timing screens here, but you are looking at the leader of the LMP2 class as they roll their way on through, and you can see running wide there, that's McGrath, who seems to just get a little bit unsettled coming into the penultimate corner in the dirty air of his opponent in front. And just to ask you, Andy, when you run these LMP2 machines, having dirty air over the front end of the car is an absolute nightmare.
Yeah, it certainly is. These cars, you want that fresh air in front of you to be able to get the maximum downforce you can on these cars. Cars are really quick, and you can lose a lot of time being in the dirty air because you've got to brake a little bit early. And it's all about, in them LMP2 cars, braking as late as you can to maximise the speed coming into the corners. But going back to the GT3 race here, we're looking at Mark Fletcher in the BMW in third place at the moment with that brand new Mercedes just in front of him at the moment, doing really well. In fact, two of them in front. So there's having a good show out here at the moment with Castell and Tilloff with the BMW driver in third place there. But as I said before, these BMWs around Watkins Glen are certainly the car to be. But at the moment, the Mercedes are holding them at bay.
Oh, indeed. And that Mercedes, very strong on the straights by the looks of things. It is the case. That V8 under the hood of the German machinery being able to take on the BMW's own powertrain. And Mark Fletcher here finding out all about that in terms of having to stay in the slipstream right now. Tijov and Castile as they make their way through turn 5 and down to turn number 6. And as they roll the way on through, given the fact that this is a 2-hour race and we're not even 5 minutes in right now, the focus is very heavily on trying to secure track position currently. And we normally see a little bit later in this opening portion of the race, around when we get to 10 to 15 minutes, we start to see that settle down, where drivers focus a little bit more on the strategy plus their track position. And as we get closer and closer to those pit stops, it is the case that our drivers are more focused on what is the strategic element, or if they need to get ahead of a driver they're running closely with, that's when we'll see those very quick laps starting to be pumped. And it's almost as if they think they're sunny in a qualifying session and they've got to go hard. But it looks as though here that Tijov going a little bit deep as they roll their way out to turn number 9 into 10, and Mark Fletcher staying right there with him. And as they come on through now and heading up into that turn 10 corner in particular, it is the case that Fletcher looking very strong here after that difficult start, and Tijov really under pressure. This is giving Castile the opportunity to run away as they roll the way through the right hand of turn number 11, and as they do, Mark Fletcher looking for the move.
Yeah, it certainly is, and good defensive line there for Tilloff. Knowing that, Fletcher was right on his tail just to try and break that slipstream coming down into turn number 1. Did a great job there, you know, because Fletcher was right onto the tail, right onto the bumper there, Tilloff, and should have been able to get that move done. But straight away, Tilloff covered that inside line, which gave Fletcher nowhere really to go. So he just carried his own, but you can just see how close these guys are out on track, fighting it really hard. And what that is, like you said before, is Castile has been able to get away from these two as they're battling really hard. So they just got to be conscious of that, battling this early into a 2-hour race. They should be working together really to try and close that gap with P1. It's still early days, and to be fighting this hard and letting other drivers get away is always a risky move. And it was interesting that you were talking about strategies. We haven't talked really about strategies, Paul. Obviously, these GT3 cars can get round here in an hour on a full lap of fuel, but there's certainly going to have to be some fuel saving in there. But what we're certainly watching out on track at the moment is there's certainly no look for any fuel saving with Mark Fletcher. He really wants that second position.
Oh, indeed. I agree with you there, Andy. And it is the case that right now, Fletcher really putting that pressure on, doing everything he can, as we see Tijov there going deep once again at the hill corner of turn number 8. And as they roll the way up into 9, this time just not able to find a move. The Tijov's racing driver here, the one thing he does have to his advantage, he seems to have a lot of acceleration under the hood of that Mercedes. But of course, the fact that he keeps running a little bit deep into hill means that he's having to use more fuel. He's really having to use the full range of the RPM band in each gear to stay ahead of the BMW behind. That may start to push him away from perhaps his ideal strategy that he might be thinking of. Let's say, for example, if he were to fuel save right now, he's definitely got too much pressure on him to fuel save as he goes on to another lap. They go on to lap number 5 right now. It's crazy to think that we are already on to our 5th lap. We've got plenty more in the schedule as we see it behind. They run a little bit wide at turn number 1. It is Callum Puddicombe, and as they all roll the way up at this point, Tijov under that pressure, but you can see that gap opening there as they make their way through 2 and 3 and up into 4. And it's only now, once they start to get in the final run up towards the bus stop chicane, that Tijov under that pressure. Mark Fletcher looks the inside, he swings back to the outside here, and that's going to be out on the brakes as we see that Tijov's going to have the outside to inside line. And as they roll the way on through, it's one of those situations where Fletcher backs out again, and I think Fletcher trying to tease out a mistake.
I think that is exactly what Fletcher is trying to do. Putting Tillhoff under a lot of pressure at the moment, getting as close to that bumper as he possibly can do, but still being able to brake hard. Weaving and diving, as we saw there on the last straight, and just putting him under pressure and just trying to get him off guard at the moment. But Tillhoff is doing a cracking job at holding Fletcher at bay. I mean, this track is really hard to make a really clean pass on. There's a lot, it's probably more in favour for the defensive car, but what we can see on the screen now is Mystic is starting maybe to come into play here. The front runners, we can just see him at the top of the screen there, just going around the corner, obviously just getting lapped after his lap 1 incident. He may come into play and slow up some of these drivers, so you know the Tillhoff could use that thing as we watch him side by side coming into turn number 10, and this is just all defensive moves at the moment from Tillhoff. He may be actually frustrating Fletcher as well. Obviously, we talk about Fletcher trying to get a mistake out of Tillhoff, but Fletcher could be getting frustrated with the fact of how much Tillhoff is actually defending here. So doing a cracking job at the moment is the P2 Mercedes driver.
Oh, indeed. And one thing I've noticed whilst we're talking about the battle between these two, as we see a flash of lights there for what is Alan Mystic, whereby he's been asked to get out of the way by both Tillhoff and also Mark Fletcher. And Mystic responding very kindly to that as they make their way through turns 2 through to 4 and head up towards the bus stop chicane. It's the case, our leader in the GT3 class, and that's Wayne Castile, has not really broken away. We'll talk more about that in a second. As Tillhoff has to go defensive once again, and Mark Fletcher pinning him to that inside to outside run. But a huge jump over the entry curve there into the bus stop chicane. And it looks as though it's worked out.
Yeah, definitely. Caused that little bit of pressure there. Tillhoff went in a little bit too hot. Offline coming into that inner, and on that second one was a bit wide, so just pushed out wide for the outer loop there, and just gave Fletcher the inner line to be able to make that position. So Fletcher's managing to get that P2, and it'd be interesting to see now he's sort of been let off the leash, if he can get up the road with Castile and close him down. But Fletcher certainly be the man on the move at the moment, but don't count Tillhoff off yet. He's still there in 3rd place, is the Mercedes driver, so a cracking job at the moment.
Indeed, and as they roll the way on through, we do look back a little bit further here to Alexander Posma, who is holding off Dilts behind the two Mercedes drivers as they roll the way through, and they're battling for P8 in the GT3 class. They make their way up into the braking zone for turn number 9 as they rolling through the corner here. It's the case, I think the Sapphire Simsport driver just tying himself to the back of Posma in terms of pace right now, and it should be pointed out, in fact, that Alexander Posma on our grid chart, we actually didn't cover him. He was listed as starting in P25, and he's made his way all the way up. He's gained 12 places since the start, up to P13 overall, and that's quite a gain there from Posma. It does seem as though at the expense of others, but also some great battling through the field there by Posma, and also Dilts to an extent, gaining 6 places since the start.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously I'm just looking at the front of the LMP race. Is Patrick Gannon seems to have taken over the lead of the race, taking over from Ninok in 2nd place. So he's really made a push, gaining 3 places, the biggest mover in the LMP field. Ninok down 1 places, and Cook unfortunately down 2 places in 4th place. So Patrick Gannon has made a real big charge at the start of this race. To be doing, as we can see him now getting involved with the back end of the GT3 field, and this is what is going to become common from now on in, is seeing these LMP2 drivers right behind the GT3s. And the other tactic from an LMP point of view is where you find it, as we look back at a replay here.
Oh, indeed. I believe this was, at the time, Patrick Gannon coming on through as he rolled his way on through, down through, well, I think I'm seeing here turn number 8. What are you seeing on your screen? Because I'm starting to see some. I think that's the case. We've got a little bit of a glitch with regards to our replay here with regards to Patrick Gannon. But as we come back to the live pictures now, goodness me, ladies and gentlemen, we are seeing a few technical issues here today, and we do apologise for that. It is the case that it's a Sunday evening, and well, it's decided that technology has not favoured us at all here today. But we are still able to bring you those live pictures. We see Patrick Gannon leading and having come through a versus Nin later on, and as they roll the way on through. And we should point out, ladies and gentlemen, we are still working furiously to resolve those sound issues, because I know you guys and girls at home all want to hear the roar of the engines, and particularly that Mercedes V8 with that very guttural roar, and also the roar of that BMW with its turbo infused engine, as we do see here Scott Angelo closing up to the back of Gooch, but they're having to find their way past Alan Mystic.
Yeah, it definitely is. And Alan Mystic now obviously just getting swamped by all these GT3 cars. And it's really frustrating as a driver. Obviously, it wasn't his fault on that first lap. But obviously, you're going to have to move out of the way, which impacts your lap times even more if you're trying to get on the back of the field. And it's just unfortunate the way racing does go here as we're watching Scott Angelo coming down to the inner loop. And we can see the lines that they take, how much these cars bounce as we move forward. Move back there too, Chris, again. And then watching coming around this outer loop, it's really quick. The guy's using all of the circuit on exit to just maximize the speed coming down here. And this is a really tricky corner. Certainly, I think this corner is going to come more into play further on into the race. When we get past that hour mark where the tyres are starting to wear, that's really going to start influencing the tyre. And we might see a few cars spinning it around that corner.
Oh, indeed. And that'll be the challenge for our drivers in managing those tyres as they go deeper and deeper into the race. And as you say, Andy, a lot of corners here where they load the tyres quite heavily and want to get on the power as soon as possible. But the majority of these machines being rear-wheel drive, in fact, I think all of them are being rear-wheel drive. And, well, in our, what is our GT3 class, we've got to come. Oh, goodness me, as it looks though. Theo there's got it wrong. And there's been some contact with Gooch. Oh, goodness me.
Oh, no, as we see Tillhoff just going into the side of car number 17 there, the LMP. That was Ninok. I think he was in second place. All carnage as we can see him come round, literally backing it up, trying to get himself around. Was in no man's land, had nowhere to go there, and then just caused a car park. And unfortunately, his steering was completely broken. Tried to get away, and unfortunately picked up the second place in the LMP. So not the most crowning moment there, probably, of Tillhoff's career.
Oh, indeed. And as we do return to live pictures now, we do see a Martin Tillhoff here, who currently in the pit, and well, at his expense, others will gain. And Alex Persian in particular starting to find his way back up the order a bit further after a very early pit stop for an instant early in the race as he makes his way on through. And meanwhile, we do cut to Chris Gooch here, who in a very heavily wounded BMW M4, where he's driving around right now, but I can imagine it won't be long before he does decide to bring it into the pits. He's going to try and get that car all the way round. And well, in terms of time right now, we're only 15 minutes in. There's no way I think he can really convert that into his strategy unless he's definitely going to commit to a free stop.
Well, I mean, there is that. The amount of aero damage would be on the front of that car. Going around these corners would be absolutely treacherous. It's hard enough when you got the full aero. When you haven't got a complete front end like Chris hasn't got on that BMW, it's pretty bad. So he's sort of like a sit and duck as we watch Baron Glover there in the Mercedes just behind him. We'll see his pace, see if he can keep it going. A lot of drivers can still do that. This course hasn't got really long straights or anything like that can really impact on high top end speed, but certainly being a technical course as it is, it's going to be interesting to see. But it'd be interesting to see the winners and losers out of all of that carnage that we saw from Tillhoff.
Oh, indeed. And speaking of winners and losers, we've just saw a winner in the form of Timothy Bray from Team Upstate, gaining a position on Alexander Posma there from Posma Motorsport behind through the last few corners. They're running side by side, the pair of them, from turn 8 through to turn number 10. And where it looks like Posma's going to come back, he's looking up the inside here with the straight line speed of that Mercedes. And Timothy Bray not actually batting hard for it. But again, he's aware of the fact that he's now going to have a completely flat out run from the exit of turn 1 up to the bus stop chicane. And well, with Posma going a bit deep, it's going to be the side by side run already, and I think Posma at this point will be hoping that AMG power can just keep him ahead, and he has got his nose slightly ahead, but he is on the outside here as they make the way past turn 4 and now up into the bus stop chicane. It's Brown on the inside, it's going to be Posma on the outside. They head into the braking zone, and Posma here looking to go later on the brakes. It's outside to inside, and as he rolls his way on through, brilliant racing between the two, but there's a tiny bit of contact, and it continues down to turn number 5.
Yeah, there's a classic example of why you don't go too wide into that inner loop. The guys were so brave there, and good respect to both of them gave each other just enough room to not take each other out. But a very risky move this early on in this race. But these guys really wanting to get that top position of fifth position, battling out with Tim Bray. They're in number 6 car, but it's in 6th place. Sorry, it's all going on at the moment, isn't it, Paul?
Oh, indeed. And to think this may just be a hosted race. There may not be any points or prizes up for grabs, just a little bit of racing pride there. But it is the case all of our drivers really committing to the racing action as they come on through. And, well, Timothy Bray here will be thinking about how do I get back versus that Mercedes. And also, to be fair, this is a great opportunity for a good number of the drivers here today who are not running necessarily in the Mercedes AMG to get a feel in their own respective cars what it's like to battle against that Mercedes AMG car that's recently been introduced to iRacing. Get a feel for where it's strong, where it's weak, and what we've seen so far is that it seems to be an absolute monster on these straights. Does not seem to be touchable compared to the BMWs or the Ferraris, but in the corners it does seem to have a little bit of that innate understeer that we've seen in the AMG machines in the past.
Yeah, we see Timothy Bray is going extra, trying to keep the lines nice and tight, but we can see Posma just going a little bit wide into turn number 1. I agree with you there. It seems to be on par with the BMW in a straight line speed, and the BMW has always been renowned for being super quick in a straight line as we watch down. Even with that slipstream there, you can't quite get up to make that pass. So that Mercedes certainly is looks like it's taken the mantle for straight line GT free speed.
Oh, indeed, and as we cut here to Wayne Castile making his way through at turn number 8, the Moradnis QTNM squad driver just pushing on. But as they roll their way on through right now, it is a situation that Castile under a little bit of pressure from Fletcher, but Fletcher not quite close enough to go for a move.
No, definitely not. Just keeping it nice and clean, these two out front. Castile got up, but Fletcher has really put them down. He did have like a 2-second gap, did Castile, but Fletcher has eaten into that and now has got onto the back. But he should be used to it with obviously the fight he was having with Teal early on in the race. So should know where is the ideal place to put it. But we'll see Fletcher here put in Castile under a lot of pressure coming down to start another lap here, lap number 14.
Oh, indeed, and as they make the way on down, it is the case. I think we're getting a replay here at the moment of what is the GT3 start, unless I'm mistaken. And, well, right now it is the case that the racing going on. Excuse me, but as our drivers are making their way on through, and indeed the GT3 machines looking very menacing here at the Watkins Glen in this event hosted by FindingSpeed is the case right now. We will be shortly cutting back to Castile and also what is Fletcher as they battle their way up into the bus stop chicane.
Yeah, definitely. These two drivers are evenly matched at the moment, but Fletcher has got that bit between his teeth. The BMW driver has clawed back the deficit that Castile had from the fighting that we saw with Tilhoff and Fletcher earlier on in the race. So he certainly seems to be the man with the speed at the moment, but could, like you say, be pushing that car really hard to try and close that gap down. And what the drivers are probably thinking of and got to be thinking of is that strategy. You know, 2 hours on a track that is notoriously hard on tyres, and certainly with the track temperature as well, it's just going to add a lot harder when it get into the last half an hour of the race.
Oh, indeed. And as Castile right now under that pressure, rolling on up into turn at number 10, it is the case that we do have our tech guys still working on those sound issues. And, well, I think that's the case that right now, Castile, he won't be worried about the sound. He won't be worried about any sound in his car other than the sound of that BMW behind, if he can hear it over the deafening roar of the V8 in front of him as he makes his way through the final corner. And, well, Castile, one thing I was trying to say earlier, but all the racing action prevented me from doing so. Andy, we saw when Castile had the lead and Fletcher was battling with Tilhoff, and they were battling for P2. Castile wasn't really breaking away. He got to 2 seconds away, but it was almost as if he hit that 2-second wall and then just couldn't break free, couldn't get any further. Do you think there was a bit of fuel saving or tying his pace to Fletcher?
He could possibly have been doing it, but obviously, you know, his speed, it may be at where his maximum speed was. I mean, we're seeing sort of like a carbon copy of the fight we saw with Tilhoff and Fletcher at the start of this race. And like I said before, you know, this track is really hard to make that passing move. And it's a lot of the passing moves come from a mistake from the front driver. If you can keep the car on the track map, the track guide that you gave excellently at the start, Paul, it's extremely hard to pass a car around here in Watkins Glen. So you've just got to bide your time. Fletcher's just got to bide his time because, like as we saw earlier on, he could not pass Tilhoff until Tilhoff made a mistake. and then he capitalised on it. So he just has to make sure that he can capitalise on anything that Wayne gives him out in front. But as we see here now, the LMPs are starting to catch up the front, as we see the car 17 there, trying to make his way back after that early incident that he was unfortunately involved in. But these two pretty much glued together at the moment.
Oh, indeed. And that was Quacknin going past, who's currently running in P4 in the LMP2 class. And to be honest, we haven't seen too much of our LMP2 drivers since the start of the race. And the simple reason for that is that we've had a lot of our action happening within the GT3 class. And we do only have 5 to 6. In fact, we were having 6, but it's the case that only 5 made it to the grid. And it is the case we've got 5 LMP2s racing around right now. And they're running quite separate from one another, with Patrick Gannon leading. Or we will cut to them in the near future. But right now, we are focusing this battle for the lead of what is the GT3 class, and with our race time now approximately 23 minutes and nearing into that 24th minute, do you think, Andy, now these two in the lead, for example, so Castile versus Fletcher, they're starting to think more about the strategy here and trying to get the one up on one another? Because when we talked about it in our pre-race briefing, it did sound as though it was a 2 or 3 stop on the cards, and the 2 stop seemed to be the better of the 2 options.
Yeah, I mean, Fletcher at the moment is in the ideal position. He's just following in the tone of Castile up in front. So he is getting pretty much a free tow around the entirety of this Watkins Glen's track. Castile is the one that's working really hard in the front and trying to punch through that air, but Fletcher's doing a perfect job in exactly that. I think it's completely down to strategy. He's probably got the pace to overtake Wayne, but is not looking at trying to do it at the moment. So I think he is trying to fuel save as we move briefly over to the leader of the LMP2s there, as we saw him out in front. But back to this interesting battle back at the front of the GT3 class.
Oh, indeed. And as we do cut to our LMP2 machines, we now cut to second place driver Kenneth McGrath here from Snowmen. And just a brief glitch there, ladies and gentlemen, we are just trying to deploy some fixes in the background to the sound issue. So you will see every so often our cameras may jump a little bit all turdy, some data may go missing on the screen. But don't worry, don't panic, you haven't lost it. It is the case that we are just trying to fix those issues, and there's the occasional reboot or restart. But right now, Mark Fletcher still in that pursuit. And whilst we were briefly looking at Kenneth McGrath, who was chasing after Patrick Gannon, the gap between the two of them quite sizable, nowhere as close as this battle here between Fletcher and Castile as they head down to turn number 1 again. They go back onto what is now for them at lap number 15, keeping in mind, of course, that our GT3s now are already mostly lapped down on the LMP2 field as a whole. As we see they're siphoning their way on through is one of our LMP2 machines. That's number 151 car of Brett Accord from Divided by Zero Motorsports, and we can see here Brett Accord having to find his way on through, and it can be a little bit tricky, particularly when you're coming between 2 GT3s that are battling, but he's been able to steer clear of the battle, and Castile and Fletcher both parting the seas as we focus on Accord here and then look to see Castile following on through. And well, I was wondering there whether Fletcher might have been able to capitalise on an opportunity, because that can sometimes happen when you agree, Andy, when you have an LMP2 come on through. It's the case that you can watch them coming and think, right, I need to get in with that LMP2, tuck into as close as possible behind and use the space they create to get past my foe.
Definitely is, but at the moment I think Mark's being very fair. I think the last 2 LMP2 cars that have come up behind Mark Fletcher, he's been flashing Castile in front of him to tell him that there's an LMP behind him to let him pass. So Mark's being very, very kind at the moment. I just don't think he's got any intention to make a passing move on Castile as long as the pace still remains the same. And we can see the gap there on the timing screen between second Mark Fletcher and third Puddicombe in third place is 9.5 seconds. So, you know, the gap is quite sizable that these two have. Oh, as we see a little bit of a squirrely moment there from Castile coming out of turn number 9. That can't be the size of going already. Only 26 minutes into this race, but seems to be pushing really hard. And Mark Fletcher's just, it's like a Sunday drive for him, I think, at the moment.
Oh, indeed. I think he really is controlling this one. It does seem as though Fletcher does have the pace to be able to push, but instead of what he's doing, he's just staying with Castile. And we talked about this earlier, this concept of staying close and trying to get the driver ahead to make a mistake by putting that unbearable, that unrelenting pressure. And good news, ladies and gentlemen, it is the case. You should be able to hear the tones of engines now at the Watkins Glen Speedway on iRacing. And if that's the case, that's because all the sound issues have been resolved. And now we can hear this battle in its full engine roaring glory as we see Fletcher going round the outside here, and well, Castile not putting up a fight. He's decided to tuck in, and I think perhaps he's thinking more about the strategy here.
Yeah, he's probably thinking, you know, I've been leading the race for the majority of it. It's your turn now, so I can get in your slipstream. But it'd be interesting to see if Castillo can actually keep with Fletcher coming here. We saw how quick he was and how quickly he actually closed down that gap to Castillo. And we can see that already. Just making a little bit of a gap, nearly up to a second now. So Fletcher might be putting down the hammer, and Castillo may be struggling to keep up the speed with Fletcher, as we can see, going out to 1 second at the moment. So Fletcher really putting the hammer down here, and we'll see if Castillo can respond with anything that he does have.
Oh, indeed, and as they roll the way on through, I'm very sorry to announce off camera that we have had our 5th place driver in the LMP2 class of Nin into the pits. In fact, I think it's a retirement for the LMP2 driver of Kwok Nin, and well, we are very ashamed to say that is the case, that we now only have 4 LMP2s running, and well, that does happen, of course. I think it's the case for Nin and also for Thompson. It's just not worked out for them, but we do cut to RPM Racing's Patrick Gannon in the LMP2 class, who is leading at the moment by an advantage of 12.5 seconds, and in quite a comfortable advantage here. And behind we see Corey Cook here, P3, the Guardian Esports driver, and it does look as though our top 3 in the class all separated in 12-second intervals, as right now he is in pursuit. In fact, no, it's not a 12-second interval there. My eyes deceive me. He's right up behind McGrath, and McGrath under a lot of pressure now as they roll their way out of the last corner and go into another lap. And Corey Cook's going to have the mother of all slipstream toes here. If he can't get it into 1, he's going to have an absolutely huge opportunity in the run towards the bus stop chicane. And I think right now, as we ride on board here, he'll be setting up for the move into the bus stop. Would you agree, Andy?
Definitely, I think so. Looking in, I mean, obviously we've got a Ferrari just in front. They both should be able to get past going through the S's, just taking up the inside. But always a treacherous move here. Look, oh no! Just, I could see that coming. Oh no! Oh, absolutely terrible. So as we saw there, the LMP coming up on the inside, and the Ferrari came, just cut up that line. I could see it happening, and unfortunately then the Ferrari cannoned back into Corey Cook. So that battle we were watching there for second place is sort of been negated now as we watch a replay there. We can see just coming up the car behind, almost just closing, then the Ferrari just gets outside and then just unfortunately comes across the track and hits the side of Corey there in the LMP. It's one of them things you really need to be cautious of when driving these LMP2 cars going up that S's, because them GT3 cars are going flat out, and to ask them to move off the racing line is, as we saw there, that he moved a little bit too much and clipped the wall and just cannoned back into the side of him. So that's one of the treachery things of Watkins Glen, and certainly with driving them LMP2 cars.
Oh, indeed, and I agree with you there, Andy. Very unfortunate incident, and it does look as though, as we look at our P10 driver in the GT3 class of Brian Hoffman here from Divided by Zero Motorsports, he has been in the wars. There's been quite a bit of paint shorn off the front bumper of that Ferrari 488, and well, with this circuit being so flat out for a good period of time, there is that risk, particularly in the mid-engine rear-wheel drive cars. Even the slightest lift can trigger a sense of lift-off instability, what we also refer to as lift-off oversteers. They go into corners, and Cameron Culverell will know that too well from Sim Racing Grid as he makes his way through the left-hander. As we see in the rear of the pitch there, P10 of Hoffman getting it wrong through turn number 10.
Yeah, it's obviously his aero's completely gone, trying to go full speed around that turn 10. Doing the right thing here, just trying to look for a gap. Oh.
Well, you say he's doing the right thing, and it does look as though the Mercedes AMG there just got caught a little bit shy and decided actually they were going to cut onto the inside. And we just take a look back here at what happened. This was Brandon Lovier's perspective as he made his way into turn number 10 here. Now he's going to have a clear road thinking, okay, everything's fine, and there's a Ferrari in the way. The Ferrari's rolling forward, and then he's making the split-second decision, which was to pull to the left-hand side, which, to be fair, you would normally do, thinking that car was going to roll across the circuit. But then I think Brian Hoffman decided, actually, no, there's another car coming. I need to slam on the brakes once again, and both drivers there involved in an incident, which is very unfortunate. But thankfully for them, this is just effectively a practice for the real thing in a week's time, and so they won't be too worried about that. But I think there might be a few swear words down in the paddock, or at least mumbled under those virtual cockpits. I
would imagine so there. Unfortunately, Brian trying to come through that turn number 10, it's a very tricky corner. It's easy to spin the car there, and unfortunately he had that front end downforce damage on there. So as soon as he came around the corner, as we're watching Scott Angelino come around now, is that he lost control of the car, and the car just spun away from him. most of the time you can spin away and you're facing forward. Unfortunately, he was facing into the track, and pretty much, you know, it's one of them because it's a really blind corner, as we saw on board there. As soon as he came around the corner, there was a car in the middle of the road. There's not a lot he could have done, to be fair, to get out of the way, and unfortunately that just put Brian's race pretty much out, and Brandon's as well, car number 88, the Mercedes, that was going to the side. So a lot of mistakes happening here, and like you were saying, Paul, it's probably not going to be life-ending and the ideal place you want to do it, but these are all the pitfalls of Watkins Glen, and this is why the 6-hour race around Watkins is probably only 6 hours and not 12 hours, is because it's so taxing on the drivers, because they've got to have eyes in the back of their ears, and also for the spotters as well, to let them know what's going on track, because the position and everything on the track could change within an instant, and a lot of these corners are blind, so you really need to have a good spotting team behind you, like most endurance teams do have, and that's where they really earn the money around this Watkins 6 hour, obviously 2 hours here today, but we're just seeing all the pitfalls that can come when these guys do enter into the 6 hours.
Oh, most definitely. And as we ride on board here with Alexander Posma, he will know from the start of the race, he's come all the way up from the back of the GT3 class to P5, which is a huge achievement. He's avoided the carnage. He's avoided the trails and travesties that other drivers have gone through. And right now he's hunting down Scott Angelo from Muradness M Squad ahead as they both make their way out of the final corner. And I think Posma here will be thanking his lucky stars so far that he has not been involved in any moments where he's dodged the issues and the incidents as he comes down to turn number 1. He's starting to size up that opportunity on Angelo here. In terms of lap time, that last lap between the two of them, it was the case that Angelo was 2/10 of a second faster, but Posma on the whole has been the faster of the two drivers, and I think now Posma's starting to feel that dirty air off the back of the driver in front. It will mean that he's able to gain in the tow down the straights, but of course he does have to worry about the front end not wanting to turn in as aggressively coming in into these heavy braking zones, such as rolling into the bus stop chicane. He'll feel it briefly when he goes into left-hand transition here, but as more importantly when they run their way down through turn 5 and down into turns 6, 7, 8 and 9, that's where he's going to feel it the most. But Scott Angelo, to be fair right now, doing a very good job just to keep the pace on going, and we can see there with the data at the bottom of your screen how the two drivers have stacked up in terms of lap time, and it is the case that over the last couple of laps, particularly on lap 16, Angelo losing almost a whole second on that lap, and that may be just due to a little bit of a moment as they make their way through the boot, or sorry, through the boot section, but coming through the toe in particular, through the toe hairpin at turn number 8, and right now Angelo is being reeled on in, but it seems as though when they both have clean laps, they've both got rather similar lap times.
Certainly do, and just want to comment there on Scott's picture. I mean, if you didn't know what nationality he was, you could have a really good guess. I mean, that's a cracking hat he's got there. On there is Scott is currently in P4, but these two really need to work together to try and bridge that gap, because third place is only just up the road 5 seconds, and in these cars, if two cars work really well together, they should be able to bridge that gap. So third place is well within reach, but that battle out in front of the GT3s as we watch Mark Fletcher here, I mean, I think he was being just held up by Castillo. We can see here 3 seconds, not massively, not a real big lead here, but a significant one to obviously negate any slipstream effect, and Mark really pushing on now to stamp his authority on this GT3 race.
Indeed, as we can see from the chart in the bottom right corner of your screen, it is the case that over the course of the last 5 laps, Fletcher has really had that advantage and gradually extended that gap since he made the move for the lead. And I do wonder whether Castile in this instance has thought more about, you know what, play the long game here. Don't really fight Fletcher too hard. Make him work for that move. Make him use a bit of fuel. Make him use a bit of tyres. As we see there, Patrick Gallon coming into the pits from the lead of the LMP2 class. And with that little cloud of smoke there, I think it's the case he may have just forgotten where the pit limiter line is and decide to slam on the brakes right at the last moment.
It definitely is one of them pits just coming around that last turn. You literally got to cut it nice and sharp to get into this pit lane. You know, you're in 4th gear coming into there, so you really need to do that. And we saw Paul there just hankering on his brakes, doing a little bit of smoke to stop him down, because there's nothing worse, isn't there, in when you're racing, having a really good race and then getting that pesky 40-second stop and go penalty for speeding in the pits. I think that's I've certainly succumbed to that effect but it's not ideal, and it is a race ruiner. But hopefully Patrick there got his car stopped in time, and it's just a scheduled pit stop for them. But as we can see in the timing, it's only 37 minutes in. These LMP2 cars don't hold a lot of fuel and doesn't take. Oh, as we see Patrick Gannon changing some of his tyres. This is an early tyre change here that I wasn't expecting.
Oh, indeed. I think by going for tyres, he's looking at, I think, the prospects of a fresh roll, because he did have a sizable advantage of 12 seconds before he pitted. Now, that tyre change, of course, will add the best part of 30 seconds onto the pit stop, as we actually also see there the number 25 car going up onto the jacks of Kenneth McGrath. So they both deciding to go for tyre changes, and Patrick Gannon will retake the lead. He'll come back out as he proceeds into the pits as the leader of the LMP2 class, and Kenneth McGrath doing the same here. And I think perhaps they're both thinking about taking an early tyre change and seeing what prospects that provides lying in wait as we wait for Kenneth McGrath to come off the jacks. But then behind we do have Corey Cook, who is currently the best part of listed on our time screens there, 2 minutes down, but I think that will be updated in due course when he comes past the start finish straight, as Cook coming on through here. Remember that Corey Cook, of course, was involved in that instant earlier on, making his way through turns 2 and 3 with a wayward Ferrari, and it was unfortunate for the Guardian Esports driver, who was really trying to hound down that second place, chasing after McGrath. But still, there's a lot of time to go, and right now the lap times would say that Cook is gradually starting to build that momentum up again, and he'll take a little bit of information from the fact that McGrath has come into the pits, and that gap has come down so much that I think he'll understand, yep, a tyre change has been made, and therefore how can he use that data? That'll be the question. We come back to Callum Puddicombe here in P3 for Altitude Esports, and he's running a little bit of a quiet race at the moment, and he hasn't really got anybody around him to race with. 17 seconds off the leader, 13 seconds off of Castile in P2, and he's got a nice advantage to Posma behind. What's going through his mind right now, in your opinion?
I think all he needs to be looking at now, I mean, for me, this is the ideal position here for Callum. He hasn't got the pressures behind, and he hasn't got to watch what the car in front of him is doing. So it's a perfect scenario for himself, just to cut his own lines he wants to do, go around this track how he wants to do it under no pressure. So the only pressure that's going to be put on Callum is himself. You know, he just needs to keep the time. But then, I suppose on the flip side, you always want somebody around you, because they're going to push you to get that faster time. You almost sort of get like complacent when you're in no man's land, and Callum's been there for a considerable amount of time. Can't really make any inroads into Castile in second place in front of him. I think the drivers behind him are catching him up slowly, though. The gap was 5 seconds. That's certainly come down at the moment. So I think Posma and Angelo will be joining Puddicombe for a little bit of action later on. He's probably welcome it, actually. I think he's probably thinking, where is everybody? Why am I here all on my own? But yeah, so Callum just not, yeah, it's personal preference. I mean, what's your preference, Paul? Do you like to be on your own, or do you like to be in a big battle?
Oh, well, for sounding to be the loner of this commentary booth, I like to be on my own all the time. No, only joking. It is the case. Now, out on circuit, I do prefer to be the driver who has some space. I like to be the chaser. I like to have a goal where there's a driver in front of me to hunt down. But I like to also have a couple of seconds between myself and the driver behind. If they're closing, it gives me some room to play with. But as we take a look back here, this is to Karen at Calverwell, and the SimRacing grid driver coming into the bus stop chicane, and the rears come loose, and the car's literally had a mind of its own there. But to be fair, very well caught by that man in the fact he's managed to get the brakes on and get it stopped on circuit. I thought that was a dead cert to be heading towards the tyre barrier, but it looks as though he had other ideas, and well, he reined in what was a wayward prancing pony.
It'd be great to get an on board for whether you can, so we can show the viewers how close the drivers actually get to that wall going into that inner loop. They literally try and shave it as much as they can. If you don't, then you sort of hit the side of the track extremely hard, which we saw there, and get it. So we can see here as he comes down, didn't literally touch it near left. You can see him touching the wall. Unfortunately, he caught the curb on the entry into the next corner, which unsettled the car. And unfortunately, when you lose it at that corner, it's very hard. But done an exceptional job not to put it into the wall. So only lost time and a little bit of pride, I think.
Oh, indeed, and I think he may have also lost a couple of pounds in sudden sweat from the fear of that moment. I must admit, it made me absolutely clench when he got that close to the wall and we rode on board in the replay. My goodness. But the man is soldiering on, and Caldwell charging after Chris Gooch, to be fair, and right now he's not letting it phase him at all. He's charging after P9 in the class, and as he makes his way up towards the bus stop chicane, it is the case that every 10th counts when you're trying to find speed out of the circuit. Indeed, go to findingspeed.com today if you want to know more information about the organisers of this event, the Gaggle at the Glen, as we see Caldwell Hill in hot pursuit, and right now I think getting himself back into that rhythm. That's what it's all about here as well in an endurance race, whether it's 2 hours, 24 hours, so long as you're behind the wheel and you've got a stint, you want to find that rhythm, and it's those little mistakes that can upset the rhythm and actually upset your focus for the rest of your stint. I think Caldwell's not shown any signs of that, but you one of those drivers, and in your experience, where you find when you make a mistake and you've still got, say, half an hour of your stint to go, or in this case, all of our drivers do, of course, have the best part of an hour and 20 minutes to go. Those mistakes, they're very hard to put to bed, especially if it's a major one.
Yeah, definitely. It sort of puts you off a little bit, and when you normally come up to the same point where you've just had that spin, you're a little bit more tentative than you were before. But we certainly saw him there coming through the inner loop, and there was no fear. You can see him just taking the corners exactly like he did before, and it's just really fine margins on this track, certainly on that inner loop, as we're watching Callum come just in third place there, getting caught by Posma. That gap's coming down now, only a second, so Alexander Posma there really making a push in that fourth place to try and get onto the back of Callum's BMW there in third. But Callum will be seeing that, so it'll be interesting to see how he reacts now to it. We see the car LMP number 25 there just in the background of these two, just trying to feed up into the inside, as we see Posma just giving him a little bit of space, and that's probably not really talked about as well. These LMP2s, not only they got a fight within their class, they've also got to fight and manage where they actually hit these GT3 cars, because if you hit the cars at the exactly wrong place, you could lose a lot of space, a lot of time waiting for these GT3 cars to come around. So you've really got to look at where you're passing them, and that's where the strategy comes in. You know, you may back off a little bit on the straight to not catch the GT3 car in a really slow corner. That will cost you probably at least half a second longer than what it would do if you just lifted a little bit to let them through. But we can see on track now, Alexander Posma has got onto the back of Callum's BMW there in third place. So Callum, who was all alone for the majority of this race, has got a little bit of company.
Indeed, and as we ride on board here at Posma, to give you that feeling from the driver's perspective, it is the case closing very rapidly through turns 2 and 3. He's going to try and go around the outside into 4 here. He's going to have to really hold that outside line now, give the space. The two of them do, and Puddicombe holding at that inside, trying to go defensive. You see Posma there just knowing when he's cleared that BMW literally by a hair's width there, he timed that pullover to perfection, and therefore shut the door for any opportunity for Puddicombe to defend the inside to outside run into the bus stop chicane. And Posma there with an absolutely brilliant move. That was precision perfect, and he's up into P3, but as they roll their way out of 5 and into 6, now head into the boot loop, it is the case that Posma's still under a bit of pressure, but I think if he's able to hold on coming down here into toe hairpin, he's got this done. And as we follow them down under braking here, it looks like Posma has gained another place. He is literally ticking off these places in rapid order.
He certainly is. As the man on the move, the midfield man on the move at the moment is Alexander there in third place. Up, he's not our biggest mover. Yes, he is. In fact, up 19 places according to our timing tower. So exceptional race for Alexander there in third place. He's got a bit of a mountain to climb now. 20 seconds to the second place Castile in front of him, but just needs to try and get away from Callum behind him in that BMW. But it seems to be losing a little bit of ground at the moment. I wonder if the temperature is affecting some of these drivers. I mean, I'm just going to have a look to see what the track temperature is. 43 degrees at the moment. It did start around 40, so the temperature has increased out on track, and that's always added to cars slipping. And where you start losing a bit of confidence with the car starts slipping, that's when you start losing a lot of speed. But at the moment, it's not affecting Alexander there in third place.
Oh, indeed. Well, thankfully, we've got a bit of air conditioning in this commentary booth, but I can assure you, when I stood out there earlier, it's the case absolutely sweating. But for our drivers right now, it is hot and intense in those cockpits as Posma continues to break on through. And it does seem as though Angelo and also Bray, P5, P6, are gradually inching closer to the back of our P4 driver here as we look to Scott Angelo and into Callum Puddicombe. And you can already see, just from the camera perspective there, as we switch between the two, and we've got that data in the bottom right corner of your screen, and that gap has been coming down quite steadily over what is the last 5 laps, and as they roll the way down towards toe hairpin once again. Now I think Callum Puddicombe here may be worrying about the attack from behind, but again, this could all be a bit of a play around the strategy, because again, we do have, we believe, 2 strategies at play in the GT3 class: the free stop for those who are aggressive and decide to use more fuel, and then the 2 stop for those who fuel save and therefore get rid of that additional pit stop. And I think it may be the case, based on relative pace and how qualifying played out, that right now it could be one of the situations where Angelo and Bray are thinking more about the free stop, whereas the Altitude Esports drive they're pursuing of Callum Puddicombe is thinking more about the 2 stop and not fighting this too hard.
You can see the lap times Callum Puddicombe, the 146.65. The rest of the field around him doing high 145s, low 146s. So certainly is the slowest man within that group of GT3 cars. But exactly that, you don't know what the strategy is, Paul. You know, he could be just saving his fuel to get to that hour marker, and a lot of the drivers around him, you know, you almost get like that red mist, don't you, when you see a car in front of you and you sort of lose all track of what your strategy was and think, I just want to get past him now, I'm going to get past him, that's another position. But that little bit of indecisiveness between them and not sticking to the strategy, that's what could cost you the race come the end of the race in 2 hours, in an hour and 20 minutes time, hour and 12 minutes time now.
Oh, indeed. And you speak of that red mist, I completely agree with you there. When you do see a rival who you're battling with on circuit and as you're closing up to them, Scott Angelo will right now have to potentially resist the temptation. The first thing you want to do is get past them and move on. And, well, if you've got that pace advantage, then you have to just keep reminding yourself, I have the advantage, find the move, get it set up, and go for it. Don't just simply go head first into it, unless it's towards the end of the race, of course, when it's the final lap. And that's a bit of a different story. But here we're talking about, we're not even an hour into the 2 hours, and we can see here Scott Angelo getting very close. At the same time, he's sizing up this opportunity, and we can see there Callum Puddicombe putting the cars off centre in the middle of the road, but Angelo moves the inside here, and as they come down into the braking zone for turn number 8, it's the case of no move this time, and Angelo waiting, but it looks like the Altitude Esports truck goes a little bit deep, and this will set up a situation as we see Bray, they're going up the inside, and that is when you seize the opportunity. Team Upstate's Timothy Bray there deciding, you know, if you two are going to squabble, I'll just simply pick up the pieces when one of you goes deep, and he's up into P5, and that's some very smart driving there from the Team Upstate driver.
Certainly is. Just looking at the fastest laps timers that come through, and Callum Puddicombe is round about the rest of the drivers being round about 1/10 between the top 6 drivers in difference in fastest laps. So I think he may well be doing a little bit of fuel saving here, because obviously the difference in his lap times to the drivers around him. But be interesting to see. Obviously we should see if the guys are going hell for leather, starting to come in for their pit stops very shortly. If they do manage to eke it out to that hour marker or past the hour, we know they're certainly going to do that 2-stop strategy. But them that haven't conserved any fuel, we would expect to see them in probably within the next 5 minutes, I would imagine.
Oh, indeed, as we almost had a free wide moment there in the battle for P4 heading up into the bus stop chicane, but it was a little bit deceiving there. It looked like all 3 drivers were going to go side by side, but in the end I think it was the case that with Bray being caught up by Puddicombe, it was the case that the British driver in P5 decided, you know, I'm going to put the car in the middle of the road and cover off Angelo and force Angelo to have the worst lines of the bus stop chicane. But the Maradness M Squad driver getting very close, he goes up the inside, and what a brilliant dive to the inside.
Oh, no.
But I think there's been contact.
Yeah, there might have been a little bit of contact coming on the exit there, and unfortunately Callum was put into the barrier. That was threading the needle a little bit as we watch a little bit of replay here. Callum just going out wide, cutting back in, but then noticing that the Mercedes driver in, and unfortunately just a little bit of contact on the front there of Callum's car between the two that sent him into the barrier. That would just put pay to any strategy that Callum did have of fuel saving, and I suppose that's the risk of when you're actually just trying to fuel save to get to a certain point. If you have an incident like that, all strategy goes out the window, and then you basically just need to come in to repair. But looks at the moment that he's still continuing on, so we'll see if he's able to complete that strategy that he has.
Indeed, and as we move from the battle for P4 to the battle for P9, the GT3 class, we can see Chris Gucci from Mystic Turtles holding off the charging Cameron Culverwell from P10 there from Sim Racing Grid, and these two running at nose to tail. And it's the case, they've been like this for some time now. They've been going like this for the last 3 to 4 laps, and Gucci just having enough of a run as they make their way through the final corner and on to another lap very shortly. For them, they'll be going on to their they've just finished their 29th tour of the circuit. They're going to lap number 30 here as we're nearing the hour mark. We've still got 8 minutes before the first hour is complete, and Gucci here seems to have enough of a run to be able to stay ahead, but we do know that Ferrari can be quite fast on these straights.
It certainly does. I mean, just a little bit of cat and mouse going on between Chris Gooch and Culverwell there in 10th place. The battle of the BMW versus Ferrari. Just looking at the spread of cars, it's not spread of cars in the GT3. A lot of drivers opting for the new Mercedes as we watch them go side by side here into the inner loop. Chris Gooch on the outside, Cameron Culverwell just getting a place. I think Chris actually yielded a little bit there just to let Cameron through. Didn't think, or thought better of going 2x2 wide on that inner loop. And Cameron there getting a good jump really over Chris behind in 10th place.
Oh, indeed. And I think it is the case of the Sim Racing Grid driver, given at that instant we saw earlier on where it went a bit wrong at the bus stop chicane. Right now, he's put those fears and those worries to bed, and he is just pushing on. As meanwhile, we're starting, I think, to get some pit stops in what is the GT3 class. We've got Posma coming on in. That's the first of our GT3s to take a scheduled stop. And there he is. He peels his way into the pits out of the final corner. And the Posma Motorsport driver here, well, the question will be, can he go a bit deeper? He's pitted after 53 minutes. So if we were to take the maths here, it'd be a simple case that he would have 14 minutes remaining come the end of his second stint, so he'd have to take a third stop, and that is of course going to play into the minds of every other driver around right now, because they'll see that Posma's pitted and think, right, is he on a free stop, and who else now is going to be on that free stop, or thinking, have they just done enough to get to the two stop? As we looked at Adam Hedgecock here from Altitude Esports, we haven't really seen too much of since the start of today's program, as he makes his way through turn 1 and now up towards the bus stop chicane. He runs through turns 2 to 4. The Altitude Esports driver right now running quite consistently in the high 45s, and well, he's not too far off of the midfield pace here and chasing it down Alex Persian, but it does seem as though that gap is approximately 9 seconds and open up a little bit. I think Hedgecock here just focusing more on his strategy than racing with people.
You're seeing a lot of large gaps appearing in the field at the moment. Only a few battles out on track. Mark Fletcher at the moment at the front of the field, 4.7 seconds ahead of Castile. I mean, the lap times that Mark's putting in, 145s consistently, lap after lap. He's got the fastest lap time of a 144.19. He's certainly got to grips with that BMW out in front as Mark Fletcher. But Adam Hedgecock will be interesting to see how he's doing. Oh, a little bit of an incident there in the background between the two Mercedes of Alexander Posma. I didn't quite catch who that first car number. Yeah, but Baron Glover getting into a little bit of contact. Obviously, Posma just coming out of the pits, so them tyres will be cool. Didn't see any tyre change, so obviously opting to keep them tyres on, which is very doable in these GT3 cars. You know, pretty much can double, even triple stint. But we're looking at the temperatures that we're looking at in the 42s. It's going to be a little bit squirrely when it comes to the end of the 2-hour races. But what was interesting, obviously, when we got just going back to the LMP2s, it looked like Patrick Gannon actually probably only changed 2 tyres with the short time that he was in the air, but McGrath looked like he took all 4 tyres, so a little bit of different in strategies there in the LMP2 class.
Oh, indeed, and that splitting of the tyre change, of course, it can work to an advantage because you essentially reduce the net pit stop time if you decide to change, say, the front 2 tyres in one pit stop and then the rear 2 in the next pit stop. But at the same time, it may also lead to a little bit of an unstable car because in the end, you've got a lot of grip on one pair of tyres, but you haven't got as much grip anymore on another pair. But the driver themselves will know where that grip is and they'll know where the limits of the car is. And perhaps that also plays into the way the car's set on, particularly that brake bias and how much wear they're trying to load onto a particular tyre set at any time. But just coming back to Alexander Posma here, in the fact that he's come out behind Glover and that little bit of contact between the two of them. And Baron Glover has also taken a pit stop so far, and we can see Posma there flashing his lights furiously after that little tap, but Glover covering him off briefly, but then giving the space through 2 and into 3. And I think Posma has got the speed to come on through, but he's lost a lot of time through that contact on the previous lap, and that may hurt him in his pursuit for P3, because right now it is the case that Scott Angelo running P3 and Alex Persian behind are having relatively clear runs, and we also have Timothy Bray, in fact, my apologies, Timothy Bray in that P3 position, as Callum Puddicombe has come out of the pit lane, and well, he's just come out ahead of what looks to be there, just waiting to see, but it looks like he's just about come out in a bit of traffic, but nothing too serious compared to where it's the situation whereby Posma's had a difficult outlap.
Just 4 minutes shy of that magical hour marker was Callum there, so it'll be interesting to see if he can manage to eke out that little, as we see Alex Persian there coming in P6. But just looking down at the lap times, Posma, who is probably the one that will benchmark everyone off, took 55.9 seconds in that pit stop on there. So probably, let's have a look at down there, any of the others coming in. So it'd be interesting to see the ones that are in the pits now, like Alex Persian, to see how long he takes within that. It's 55 seconds to fill up the tank. Be interesting to see if any of these drivers are taking tyres, because just looking at our production, under Jamie there, he basically said they had to change 4 tyres when they've done the BMW Sim GT. So if these drivers are not taking tyres, it may be a little bit sketchy come that last 10 minutes of the race.
Oh, indeed, and as we see Mark Fletcher coming in from the lead of the GT3 class, it's the case that Castile has stayed out. Wayne Castile goes another lap, and well, could this be a sign of what's coming? That is Wayne Castile, who has actually come along to find that he has got a face full of traffic, and that's the number 93 car of Baron Glover, the privateer, who very quickly moves out the way there as they make the way through turn at number 4. And Castile now knows he needs to pounce here because he does have an advantage, which is he is going to make it to the 1 hour mark. And well, I think Castile definitely playing to that, what is that 2-stop strategy. And well, what about Fletcher? We will wait and see, but it is looking quite positive right now for Castile, and perhaps he'll get back into that fight for the lead later on as he rolls his way down into a turn number 6. And as he comes on through here, he's still got a bit more traffic to go, but with Castile seeing his main rival pit, Andy, I do have to ask you, does that sort of give you that extra motivation, or you sort of say to yourself, now right, now I've got to put in that ultimate lap, I've got to deliver it, because if my pit stop's coming up, I need to get back in? And Mark Fletcher on the jacks right now.
Obviously Mark deciding to have the field, but it may be that they're only taking a couple of tyres, because I probably imagine that the tyres that take the most wear on this would be the outside, because you've got a lot of fast right-hand corners, like the outer loop, then coming down into the chute, which is a left-hander, but then you've got the toe. So there's a lot of left-handers, turn number 1, turn number 11, where it's very fast right-handed corners, so it's probably just changing a couple of the tyres. Jamie there in the production box, it says it takes around about 41 seconds to fill a tank, 28 seconds for 4 tyres, and around about 7 seconds. So we see there Mark's time was a 1:09. So that sort of stacks up to the fact that he's just brimmed his tanks and changed all 4 tyres. So thanks for that, Jamie.
Indeed, and as we see Mark Fletcher making his way back up to speed, he comes back out in P3, and we really do appreciate the insights of Jamie, our production guy in the studio. He's working in the background right now as we look to Cameron Culverall here, who in P2 right now, well, it's the case that's P2 for the time being, but the strategy will see him drop down the order. We see Wayne Castile has come on in from Muradnis QT NM squad, and we're right now being serviced here. Not up on the jacks currently, but he's only early stage of his pit stop. He's only 20 seconds into his pit stop, as we do see one of our our Ferraris coming out of the pit lane very gradually there, and I do believe that's Adam Hedgecock making his way out. He is a lap down effectively on Castile, although he's unlapped himself technically just then, and Castile still being serviced here. And well, where is Mark Fletcher is one of the big questions we may ask. Well, Mark Fletcher at this point in time, well, we can't quite see him on circuit at the moment as Cameron Colville comes through. Here is Mark Fletcher. He's currently running P3, and Castile is leaving the pit lane already. Castile has decided just to go for a quick splash and dash. Well, he's filled the fuel tank up, and now he's making his way back out into the circuit. So this is a very different approach.
It's going to be a battle of strategies here. Mark's going to have them fresher tyres to be able to push a little bit more, but he actually came in just under the hour mark, whereas Wayne has came in just after the hour mark. So it may be a bit of role reversal here, where that Wayne was doing a little bit of fuel saving in that first stint, which was able Mark Fletcher to be able to get away. Now it's sort of like role reversal, because Mark has actually got to do a little bit of fuel save if he just wants to do that two-stop strategy, whereas Wayne has got a little bit more fuel. He's got an extra couple of laps now on Mark to be able to push that a little bit harder. Oh, as we see the BMW nearly hitting the wall, coming a cropper right in front of Castile there, who's leading this race. But the other interesting one is Wayne's got faster tyres, so the tyres are going to be a lot more forgiving than what Wayne's will be in that Mercedes, who didn't change any tyres. So you got sort of like every sort of permutation here. You got Mark, who's got under the hours fuel on board but fresh tyres, and then you got the flip side, you got Wayne Castile in the front, who's got over the hour, so hasn't got the fuel issues but has got the tyre wear degradation. So it's going to be interesting. 20 seconds is a gap at the moment where Fletcher to Castile, so it's going to be an interesting last hour of this race.
Oh, indeed. And well, Fletcher right now will be pushing hard because he'll know with Castile leading that Castile has not taken tyres, or at least that'll be the guess he takes. And therefore, now it's all about pushing for Mark Fletcher as we get a replay here. And I believe this involves Chris Gooch. We were only moments ago seeing Gooch out on circuit, and the Mystic Turtles right coming into turn number 10, rolling through, and the rear ends come loose. And whoa, what a snap there on the steering wheel from the number 3 car. And Chris Gooch, unfortunately, making a mating moment with the wall there, the front end of that BMW, and he's come into the pits to do the repair work. In fact, I think he's had to jump to the pits as we return to Mark Fletcher, but that was a very near miss moment for Castile there.
Yeah, classic mistake coming around that turn number 10. Will catch a lot of drivers out, especially the ones that haven't taken the tyres, because you classically see that you come in around that corner and all of a sudden the car just snaps, and unfortunately you cannot do anything to save it. When that car goes around that turn number 10 and starts losing that back end, you're just a passenger in the car, and hopefully you don't hit the wall. As we watch Callum here coming around the inner loop, just takes that inside and unfortunately will have a slow down penalty. Is that a hardware failure?
I think it may, because he's just literally gone straight on and into the wall. I think that's a steering wheel failure.
Got to be some sort of hardware. You know, this is how realistic iRacing is. We don't have the mechanical failures of real life, but what we do have in its place is the ever dependable hardware failures, you know. And unfortunately, I think Callum has just succumbed to that. That very much did look like he just could not turn that car. So it's always a hard pill to take, I think, that when your steering wheel doesn't work, and you're lucky if the steering wheel survives contact after that happens to you.
Oh, indeed. I think it's one of those situations whereby as a driver, you just have to have faith in the equipment you have, and Patrick Gannon will have that faith, of course, in the 666 machine from RPM Racing as he makes his way onto another lap here. Our leader overall, and in the LMP2 class, he makes his way in the run up towards the bus stop chicane. He has a 30.5 second advantage to Kenneth McGrath, who is running behind, and as he makes his way out towards the bus stop chicane, Gannon just flying here and really has not put a foot wrong so far.
No, it's been probably an easy Sunday drive for Patrick. Had a little bit of a challenge at the start of the race, but let's have a look at a replay here. Alexander Posma here, what's happened here? Coming down into what can be the treacherous heel, turn number 8. Oh, just loses it. Coming in, the car just bites away, comes in, and luckily he's got enough room behind him that it doesn't really cause contact with another driver or hits the barrier. But yeah, a lot of drivers seem to be struggling at the moment. Certainly the ones that maybe haven't taken 4 new tyres.
Indeed, and I think it may be the case there that Posma now will hesitate into the hill corner, thinking, will the car do it to me twice in a row? And that's the nastiest feeling you have in terms of being a driver. When you get it wrong once, and you may not be able to explain why it's happened, and we can't seem to find what exactly happened there. Perhaps it's just the tyres going away, but as we do look at our live pictures now, Kenneth McGrath here from Snowman making his way through the toe corner of what is turn number 7 as he comes roaring down towards turn number 8 once again. And his focus at this point, I think, will be on just running this race as consistently as possible and trying to peg the gap to Gannon to that 30 seconds, if not start to gradually bring it down increment by increment, as we see him get a little bit of oversteer there coming through hill and now up into 9. He does, of course, have a nice 33-second gap to Corey Cook behind, so he hasn't got too much pressure on him. He's just got to bring this to the end as he rolls on through, and it does seem to be the case that our LMP2 field has seen the highest rate of attrition in terms of percentages. We've lost 50% of our drivers.
Yeah, it certainly does. I mean, it's made all more treacherous when you're trying to make the pass on these GT3 cars, because for the difference between the speeds of the GT3 and the LMP2s, if you're not aware, it's probably about a third faster than the GT3 cars, so they quickly get onto the back of these cars and make the passing moves, and that's what can, if you're not always concentrating in them LMP2 cars, that's what can really catch you out, because before you know it, you're right on the back end of a GT3 car going into a real fast corner, and you can't slow that LMP car down fast enough, and unfortunately you have a rear end contact. We've seen a few of them here today at the Glen. Obviously lost 50% of our field at the moment, but yeah, but what's keeping the LMP2 drivers probably entertained is the fact of siving through this GT3 field, although these GT3 drivers probably think that they probably own the track with the way the lines that some of them take, I would imagine. But we're still looking at the first place in the GT3 there, Wayne out in front. 16 seconds, so the time is coming down between first and second as we watch Baron Glover here in 4th place, just on the back of Posma there. Obviously we saw him have that spin, so Wood lost a considerable amount of time, and pretty much I think the race now for Posma is to try and keep that 3rd place, but Glover certainly has a different idea in his head, but there's no difference in cars, so it's all down to the drivers, I believe.
Oh, indeed. It'll be down to the drivers to get the most out of the machine. And Baron Glover here definitely really pushing on now. Now he's got Posma in his sights and closing that gap. And on that last lap, did take 2 attempts out of Posma. And one thing we should point out with regards to that battle between what is Wayne Castile and Mark Fletcher for the lead. We did have a graphic pop up a little bit earlier. And the rate of closure at the moment, Mark Fletcher is gaining on average about 1.1 to 1.2 seconds a lap on Wayne Castile. And if we do a bit of quick mental math, that should mean the last 15 minutes, we'll see the two of them come together and a battle will kick off. It'd be very interesting to see. As for this battle for P3 right now, Baron Glover really in the driving seat, if you'll excuse the pun, as we see the number 19 LMP2 machine there coming through. That's Corey Cook, who's siphoned his way on through, and Baron Glover actually will appreciate that, because that may just put Posma a little bit off the ideal line coming through turn 1. And as they make their way towards the bus stop chicane, the gap between these two standing at what is just over a second, 1.3 seconds is the gap, as Alexander Posma here, who is now the focus of our attention, making his way in towards the bus stop chicane very shortly and just pushing on here. And well, for Posma, it is looking to be a good race, but I think right now he's just got to try and put some bugbears to bed with regards to incidents from earlier on.
Yeah, I'm just having a look at the pit stops. That's it. I don't know if the timing was right. Said that his pit stop was only 15.15 seconds was Baron Glover. So I wonder if he's just come in for repairs. Took a little bit of splash and dash earlier on. It was on lap number 9, so he might be due to come in the pit shortly to refuel. I don't know if he's actually taken his full stop yet. So Baron Glover putting a lot of pressure on Posma, and he may have to come into the pits very shortly.
Indeed, and as we focus now on the battle for P7 in the GT3 class, this is Scott Angelo, who we were talking about earlier from Radness M Squad, who is chasing down one Austin Diltz as the Sapphire Simsport driver here under pressure as they make the way through. Both of these drivers have already taken a pit stop, and it is the case, I believe, that Diltz has just put fuel in the car and also perhaps changed one tyre, if that, in the pit stop, whereas Scott Angelo has taken at least 2 tyres, if not more. And as they roll their way out of the hill corner and up into turn number 9, they've got got there the leader in the LMP2 class, who's going to separate the two of them for a brief moment, and that will give Diltz, I think, just a little bit of breathing room. But now he has to deal with the fact he has an LMP2 on his inside coming into turn number 10, but they work it out quite nicely. But now, in fact, Diltz coming into the pits by the looks of things, so we're not going to see a battle on track here for P7. They exchange places, and Scott Angelo up another position and pushing onwards. His next target, I believe, is Bray, who is only 4 seconds up the road.
Definitely is. I'm just having a look at down the pit stops, the ones that possibly have taken tyres and the ones that haven't. So Mark Fletcher definitely has taken tyres with a 1:09 pit stop. Looking at Timothy Bray is also a minute and 11 would have taken tyres. Scott Angelo would have taken tyres. The ones that haven't taken tyres are Wayne Castile, who's currently our leader. Alex Persian in P8 hasn't taken tyres either. So it's going to be interesting to see, you know, who wins out here, if it's the tyres or the non-tyres.
Well, indeed, it is going to be a trade-off here. And of course, if you are the driver who has not taken tyres, the big challenge on your mind is that you want to race, and you're going to be looking at that timing screen and seeing that gap is coming down to the drivers who've taken the tyres. But you have to forget about all that. You just have to focus on delivering those consistent laps. And speaking of delivering consistent laps, Adam Hedgecock right now may find that a little bit difficult, because he does have behind him Cameron Culverwell there from the SimRacing Grid, who has closed down the Altitude Esports driver. And as they roll their way through 5 and down into 6, it is very close. Both of them in the Ferrari 488 as we ride on board here with Culverwell, and as they come in towards the boot loop, it's the case with Culverwell not quite able to get on the power as early there on corner exit, but now as they come into the toe hairpin, he's looking very good. He goes a bit deep, he goes for a nice late apex here, and this will give him the opportunity to get a very long run down towards the hill corner here, heading towards turn number 8. Both tries in the slipstream, and as he rides his way all the way down, it's the case he's not close enough to go for the move, but he's considering it. He's thinking about his options now and trying to keep an eye on where Hedgecock may be a little bit weak, where he gains more and close up to Hedgecock, where Hedgecock is stronger, where he can just pull away a little bit. But the two seem to be very evenly matched as they make the way through 9. Now 2 quarters separates them from another lap of the circuit. I think Culverwell here getting ready to go for a move.
He is, but it's not. That slipstream between that Ferrari is really quick in a straight line there. Oh no, they are both Ferraris. I wonder why the slipstream wasn't that effective for Culverwell, for Cameron there on the back. It doesn't really seem to be closing the gap. So obviously the difference in setups of these cars, each of these cars can have their own setups. It may be that Hedgecock has got a lower downforce than the driver behind him, Cameron Culverwell, which is able to keep him out in front at the moment, because we're not really seeing the power of that slipstream. We will see it the most down this long straight, coming down into the inner loop to see if he can close up and make a move, as he's looking on the inside but not able to make it stick. So that slipstream is not as strong as maybe as others have made it.
Oh, indeed, and as he rolls his way through turn number 5, one other thing he could be doing right now is trying to do a little bit of fuel saving whilst tucked in behind, thinking about where he can just short shift a tiny bit, perhaps just a couple hundred RPM earlier than he normally would, just to give him some more fuel to play with later in the race. And of course, as they make the way down towards the toe hairpin once again, it's all tactics here. We don't know, for example, whether Hedgecock really is having to hammer that Ferrari right now to stay ahead. And as they make the way on out, both of them have been exchanging lap times, and well, in terms of their respective laps, quite equal. As Baron Glover into the pit, and well, making his way on in here in P4 he came, and now he's going to drop down the order somewhat as he does take this stop, and will continue to drop down the order here. I think Baron Glover, though, he can give himself a pat on the back. It was a good run there. As meanwhile, we looked at Alex Persian here, who is trying to hold off Timothy Bray.
So here's Alex, just the head of this group in 4th place, just holding off Timothy Bray at the moment. So we've got a good run here down the long straight to the inner loop. Alex Persian just in that ideal position out in front to be able to use them defensive lines to maximum ability to keep that BMW at bay at the moment. It seems to do a very good job. Timothy Bray's got to just try and force a mistake here from Alex in front in 4th place to try and optimise that space, but that Mercedes has got some grunt in the straight line, hasn't it?
Oh, it does indeed. It just seems to pull on the rest of its competitors. And, well, now we do have what is essentially well, it could be even a 4 to 5 way battle for this position. As we see Caldwell up the inside here of Hedgecock into the bus stop chicane. And Hedgecock deciding to back out there and not try and contest it too wide, given the fact we still do have 45 minutes on the clock plus the final lap. But Hedgecock, they're losing the position. And I think being smart, I think he's playing the longer game. But we cut back to our battle for P4. And that is quite the train of GT3s building up behind the Mercedes driver.
It certainly is, and got a few LMPs in the mix there, just trying to sieve his way through the battle for this 4th position. P25, they're just going to put offline car number 79 as our leader comes in for a scheduled stop here on an hour and 15 minutes. So hopefully this might be his last one. He might have to come in again, you know, just towards the end. But we sort of see all the LMPs coming in. We've got McGrath in 2nd place. I wonder if Cook in 3rd does come in as well. So the front 2 of the LMPs do come into the pits, but we rejoin this battle for 4th place. Alex Persian just defending for his life over Timothy Bray in 5th place. But then you got Angelo just behind Bray, so Bray just needs to be aware of that, you know, trying to get Persian offline could open himself up, as we see here. Wow, just right getting onto the back of him is Angelo there in the BMW.
Oh, indeed, and I don't mean to correct you, I think that might be Alan Mystic from Mystic Turtles in the purple-pink BMW, who's actually trying to unlap himself, but we did briefly cut to Scott Angelo, who is closing on this battle. So Alan Mystic right now in a bit of a frustrating position, given the fact that he does feel as though he's the faster driver here, and there is Scott Angelo running P6, who wants to close up to this battle, and Alan Mystic himself actually got a bit of a difficult situation with him, because he's got Brandon Lavier from Maradnes QNTM squad closing up. So Scott Angelo right now, if he hasn't got a spotter telling him, if he looks at the timing sheets, he's going to see that battle for P4 is going quite slow. And you can see here we've got a gaggle of 4 GT3s, the battle for P4 in class, and then behind them it is the battle for P15 in class. And as they make the way in to turn number 9, well, Timothy Bray here, the Team Upstate driver, will have some confidence that Alan Mystic won't dive for the move unless he really absolutely feels the need to, simply because that's not courtesy and that's not normally the way they race. But as we see them make their way through turns 10 and 11. I think the thing that Persian can try to do is, if he feels as though he's going to run slowly for a corner, he could try and back Bray up into the 2 backmarker GT3s, if we dare call them that, because they're fighting within their own race, and he can actually make life really hard for Timothy Bray.
Certainly could do, and you know, you got the unknown quantities of, like you were saying, them cars. And thank you for correcting me with Mystique there in this train in 3rd place at the moment. You know, that guy is frustrated as is, obviously getting taken out on the first lap, but you know, he's going to have the bit between his teeth and make him in as we try to see if Timothy Bray can make a brave move here. Should get it done. That inside line is quite powerful, pushes that outside driver out and gets the move done. So great move there to push out Persian to the outside of the track, coming up into that inner loop, giving him that inside line and forcing really Alex to not have a choice but to yield that position. Oh, as we see an incident just behind him, and Mystique gets hit in the back, and both of them go into the barrier, coming down into the chute. So, oh, that was pretty dull.
Well, it was a nasty moment, and as we watch him here, it looks at the number 22 car, actually went a bit deep, and as they came back together, that is where it all kicked off, and then under braking, I think number 22 car just tapping the back of Alan Mystique, and that's how it all ended there. But I think a little bit of miscommunication. That's Austin Dilts, in fact, who is running a lap ahead of Mystique, but a lap behind the battle that we saw for P4. So it's the case that multiple drivers on different laps in the GT3 class all coming together, and the 2 drivers who we'd call our back markers coming off worse for wear.
Certainly is. I mean, you can look at the timing tower. It's certainly a story of 2 halves here of all the ones that have managed to stay sort of incident free into the top 12, and then you've got the from 13th down to 24th at the moment is all the ones that have had incidents throughout this race. And that's one of the big things about the endurance racing. You know, you got your little sprint races of 15 minutes is all gun ho, just do what you can to get past and make, you know, you can do a little bit of bump drafting, door banging. But when you look at endurance racing, if you start doing that, as we've seen in this race, is that it can really affect your race, and you soon find yourselves 1, 2, 3 laps down from the leaders, and almost puts pay to your race even before the race is done. And that's one of the big things about the endurance side of iRacing, or any endurance, even in real life, is you've got to be fast, but you've got to be consistent, and you've got to be clean to be able to get the results in the bag.
Oh, indeed. And as they make their way out of turn number 5, we ride on board and look back from the rear of Alex Persian here, who has the pressure of Scott Angelo behind. Angelo's closed up, and now that test of consistency will be played out for Alex Persian. He will go for his exam here because he has been dropping backwards compared to the pace of the top 4, and Scott Angelo has been gaining as laps have gone on. And what Persian now needs to decipher in this situation is where can he defend, and in equal machinery this also gets a little bit more complicated for that reason. In fact, it comes down to the driver here, and based on the pace that we've seen, Scott Angelo should make short work of this as Alex Persian goes a little bit deep there into the hill corner. But the story will be different. It's one thing catching, it's another thing passing, even at Watkins Glen. And as Alex Persian here holds on to that P5, well, I think Angelo is closing. I think he could be setting up a move into the bus stop chicane. I don't think he wants to go for it just yet.
Definitely not, but just looking back to the pit stops again, Alex didn't change any of the tyres, so we see him sort of struggling a little bit out on track when he's going around the corners and the exit speed. And Scott, who has changed his tyres, you can see the difference in how quickly Scott can get onto the back of Alex's Mercedes in front of him, as we see Alex going a little bit around turn number 1 there, which gives Scott the emphasis going up. The S is now right onto the tail of Alex in front, so will we see a passer move here coming down into the inner loop? Only time will tell, but the teammates really are the same, exactly the same liveries here, as Scott just gets onto the back of Alex's Mercedes there. But you can sort of see the difference in lines between these two Mercedes, one with warm tyres. I mean, the temperature on track is ever increasing. It's up to 45 degrees now. So it's gone up like 3 or 4 degrees from when we first started the race, and that really does have an impact. And you can just see the difference. Scott taking a real nice tight line there coming down into the chute, where Alex is taking a more of a wider length, just getting that little bit of understeer coming around with them worn tyres.
Oh, indeed, but it does seem as though the progress that Scott Angelo is making, he's really having to try and tee this move up. It's not going to be straightforward for him, and the problem is the longer he spends in this situation, as I'm hearing that Alexander Posma, who was running P3s, had a bit of an incident up the road, and these two may be able to benefit from it. But as they make their way on through, I do think the longer Angelo spends in this position, the fact he's running in that dirty air, he has to work the tyres a little bit harder, he may just start to take away the advantage that he has benefited from in having those fresh tyres, and that is what Persian needs to think about right now. He just needs to be that thorn. As we see Alexander Posma here return to speed, but he's definitely lost quite a bit of time, because that right behind him is Timothy Bray, the Team Upstate driver, who in P4 is hunting down that final spot on the podium here as they roll the way through. And we take a look back to what happened, and this is Posma making his way through what looks to be their hill corner.
Yeah, does he lose it again coming up here, coming around into turn number 9? Yeah, it just back end just steps out on him again. That's twice that back end has stepped out on that car, and you know, from where he was at the start of the race, literally flying high, he's made a few mistakes after the round of pit stops, and has given Timothy Bray now the emphasis to take that last place on the podium away from Alexander. So Alexander's under a world of pressure at the moment. Like you said before, Paul, he'll be feeling the pressure now, because that's twice he's spun around the second half of this track. So it's going to be an interesting to see if Alex does go a little bit tentative coming around at turn number 9 and 10, where he's had the 2 incidents, and maybe give Timothy the emphasis to get in front. So it's going to be an interesting last 40 minutes of this race.
Oh, indeed, and as we come back to the battle for P5 here, noting that Alex Persian did not take tyres in the pit stop, and that delta in terms of the tyres, as you mentioned earlier, Andy, really showing itself. Scott Angelo still not able to find the pass, but Persian goes a little bit deep. But Scott Angelo there actually taking a very tight exit out of hill corner, and for Scott Angelo here, I think trying to set up the move. I don't think he wants to make this move too hard, because he is racing with a sister team car, if you will, so therefore he won't want to take his teammate out, or alternatively have that contact contacts, it doesn't work out for the pair of them. Even though this is just a hosted race, it's technically not worth anything other than a bit of pride on the line at the same time. Definitely Scott Angelo really trying to play this one out in terms of finding the best possible way on through, but Persian not letting it phase them at all as they make the way on down. And just a quick update off camera, the battle for the lead of the GT3 class between Castile and Fletcher, the gap is now down to 10.3 seconds and still closing. Angelo there gets a bit wrong out of the exit of turn 1, but he hasn't lost any momentum, and in fact they're going to go side by side all the way out to the bus stop, and Angelo gets through already. I think Persian and Angelo perhaps have been trying to decipher who should lift off first.
Yeah, probably is. But what this will do, certainly as these two are teammates, is that they can take what they learned from these pit stops, because they've both got different strategies. One's taken tyres, one hasn't. The ones who hasn't taken tyre has been in front, and the guy behind him, Scott, as we're watching, has managed to finally get through to say, well, you know, is it worth taking them tyres in the pit stop? Because if you get behind somebody who hasn't taken tyres, it's almost impossible, unless they make a mistake, to try and make them pass on this track. So it's going to be really good information for the team as a whole, having them two backing them as hard as they do. But currently watching the first place, Wayne Castile out in front, did manage to get over that hour mark into the pit stop, so doesn't have to worry too much about fuel saving. But the story behind is Mark Fletcher, only 9 seconds behind him now on a real push again, has to just watch his fuel, because he did come in at 56 minutes, so 4 minutes under the hour marker, so does have to save fuel to try to make sure he doesn't have to do that first stop. So it's interesting, it's coming down lap after lap, and like you said, I think it's going to be the last 15 minutes that we might see these two come back together again, Paul.
Indeed, and as Wayne Castile here presses down towards the hill corner once again, he will try not to look at that time board. He'll be focusing on trying to use as much of the width of the circuit as possible, trying now every apex, every acceleration point. But you can see there just the car coming loose as he rolls out of hill corner and goes over that exit curve, and the Mercedes starting to gradually show those signs of where the time's not holding up. As I hear, we've had a pass from what is Bray on Posma, and well, where is Posma in all this? Posma's on the grass, and something's gone very wrong for the Mercedes driver, as we see Angelo also close up, and Persian as well. I think Posma's been in the wall.
Well, you can see that from that car there as we look back at that replay and see what happened coming up through the S's here. I think his car just gave away again. It's a very strange place. It seems to be losing a little. Oh, is it a hardware? He almost like glitched at the top there. He saw his car just twitched and then he couldn't turn. So have we had another hardware failure?
It could potentially be that something has gone wrong for Posma, because in the end just straight lined into the one, ground along the wall. But then it is the case, he's been able to carry on as we ride on board. He is fighting with that steering wheel quite a lot. I'm not 100% sure there, but something has gone wrong on the technical side, and he's trying to get it to the pits rather than jump back. And we can see now he's back up to speed, but he's nowhere near the speed of his peers as a Persian comes on through here to take a P5. And well, at Posma right now, I think just trying to take a wounded car to the pits and decipher what's gone wrong and whether they can get the car back out. But that's going to cost him a huge amount of time in the grand scheme of things. To see another.
He's gone again. He hit the grass on the exit there, coming down into the heel in turn number 8. And literally, car just went away from it. It's been a terrible second half. It's been certainly a story of two halves for Alexander Posma. You know, he was our biggest climber in that first half of the race, up 19 places. But it's sort of all unravelled here in the second, losing a little bit of confidence. I think his first spin was coming down to the heel. Then he spun again on up into turn number 9, and it's just gone all wrong from there. We just saw him earlier on getting it all wrong into the S's, as we see Wayne Castile just pushing it right to the limit there. Real dangerous to get onto the grass coming out of that turn number 9 onto there. But I mean, the change of fortunes in this race, and that always happens in a long race, Paul, is you know, you could think 1 minute you're flying high, the next minute you're brought down to earth with a big bang.
Oh, indeed, it is the case that endurance racing gives and it takes. It is a roller coaster of emotions, and it's not over. And I know this is one of the most traditional sayings that you'll hear in the English language. It's not over until you see the checkered flag. Well, perhaps in the English language of motorsport, but it's so true. And Patrick Gannon right now will be an example of this in the fact that he's leading, but he is being closed up by McGrath very gradually. McGrath's actually got that gap down to 7.5 seconds. And over the last few laps, it does seem as though Kenneth McGrath really pushing on. And And that's the thing, you cannot take anything for granted in the endurance race. You just simply have to play with the cards you're dealt from the start of the race to the end, and when it goes wrong, you've got to have that mental resilience, something we haven't really talked about too much, that fortitude to be able to say, you know what, it doesn't matter if it's going perfectly or it's going disastrously, I'm not going to let anything faze me, I'm just here to deliver the job, lap in, lap out. And that's what Kenneth McGrath's doing right now, because earlier we thought we'd written off the fact that Patrick Gannon was effectively 30 seconds up the road and in the clear, but now McGrath coming on through, and well, we are hearing from Jamie in the broadcasting room and also looking down in the pit lane. It does look as though Kenneth McGrath has not taken a tyre change, and that may explain why he's closed the gap and is really pushing on now, Andy.
Yeah, definitely. There was 20 seconds difference between the last pit stops between Patrick and Kenneth in the LMP2. So that's why we did see that 30-second gap. Now it's down to 7.9. Looking at the last lap times, a 1:34.6 for Patrick and a 1:35.5. So 9/10 of a second faster was Patrick on that last lap. So, you know, it's worth a gamble, you know, when you've got nothing to lose. You've got no real issues behind you in third place. You know, you just got to put it out there and just try your luck. And Kenneth just decided to think, you know, to close that gap, if I don't take the tyres, I'm going to be 20 seconds ahead. If Patrick has any slight incidents, as he nearly did there, coming down the start-finish straight, that he could capitalise on and put a little bit more pressure, because Patrick would have seen that time and think, how has he just made up that amount of time on me? Yeah, he hasn't taken tyres, but you know, at the end of the day, if you have one mistake, that's it. As we watch Cameron Culliver coming down into the bus, into the inner loop, just getting it slightly wrong. Oh, unfortunately, I think, didn't he spin it before? I think it was Cameron, wasn't it?
It was indeed, but the first time he had that mistake, he managed to keep it out of the wall. In fact, locked the brakes up very nicely to avoid even leaving the track limits. But that second time, the bus stop has bitten him, and well, it is the case now. I think he's going to have to take a wounded car around. Will we see him come into the pits? Time will tell. But return to our live pictures, we see Mark Fletcher here running in at P2 at the moment, still chasing down Castile, but that gap is now 3.6 seconds and it is continuing to come down at a very aggressive rate. That last lap from Fletcher at 45.5, Castile at 47.6. That was 2.1 seconds gained in that last lap. Fletcher is flying here. Surely it's going to be a formality about where he's going to catch. It's where Wayne Castile can make that Mercedes even wider than its body kit.
It certainly is. I mean, it's just like, it's like the cat chasing down the mouse really at the moment with Mark Fletcher there just eating in. You can see like 2.9 seconds. It was staying static for a little while midway into this second stint, but Mark's now real put the hammer down. He can see his target in front of him, and as we've seen here, Castile coming in for a pit, or has he? It can't be a pit stop. He did actually come in after an hour. So unless he's just decided, you know what, these tyres are just too bad, I can't run on them, be interesting to see what he does here, because he should have enough fuel, as now we see Mark Fletcher go to the head of this race again. But I suppose anyway, Paul, like you said, it was a formality, but that's a strange stop, as yeah, we see tyres getting changed now on Wayne. Must be that them tyres are just shot.
I would say so, and this could also be the case that Castile here may be trying to get some data in preparation for the official iRacing event in a week's time, in the fact that he may be thinking, okay, you know what, I tried running the tyres really long and they fell off after a certain point, so what happens now if I put fresh tyres on, if I have to say towards the end of the race, I haven't quite got enough fuel to get to the end of the race, I have to make a quick stop for fuel, I put a fresh set of tyres on and see what pace they do, because to be honest with you, it is one of those situations where but you want to use as much data from this to feed into future races, and for Castile, I think it's one of those situations right now where we think to yourself, I can't beat Fletcher because I've got a 42-second gap now to close down. I was never going to beat him by being ahead because he was going to make his way on free. You could see that gap was going down. But Castile now will see how much that 42-second gap he can bring down in a car which should be in its best possible position, although I say that, in fact, only a 22-second pit stop. I think that's only fuel that's gone in the car.
Must have, but we did see that car go up. Maybe he did only take some outer tyres, so it's about 7 seconds for a tyre change and maybe a little bit of splash and dash fuel in there as well, so it maybe only changed sort of 2 tyres on there. But what we did notice when we were watching Wayne in the pits is that Cameron Culliver actually popped up in front of him in a very sad looking Ferrari during that pit stop, and I can see in the timing tower that he did have another crash. So not only did he have the crash on the inner loop, it looks like he had one later on in that lap, and I was wondering if we could maybe look to see if we can get that replay, Jamie, to see what happened to him second time, because that did look like a bruised Ferrari.
I think here it is, and here's Caldwell coming down the back. Well, in fact, that is the run to the bus stop chicane. And, well, I don't think it's going to go too well here the third time. Indeed, just bounced off the curb, and that Ferrari, just no actual grip in the car, and in the end, jump into the pits.
Definitely. I mean, I think it's really playing out now, and I think the guys, I mean, it's really good information for the guys when they go into the 6-hour race. You know, not under normal conditions that you could probably double stint these tyres, but this track is certainly absolutely savage on these tyres, and certainly with the temperature just rising to a crescendo. It's up to 49 degrees C, so that has gone up near enough 10 degrees in this 2-hour race, and this is all valuable information for the guys when they're looking at what to do in strategies, and I think they're all realizing now, got to take tyres.
Oh, indeed, I would agree with you there, Andy, and Castile will definitely know that as he rolls his way through, and already you can see it just looking at the body language of the car. It's a driver who's got a lot more hope and confidence in the car now. It's almost as if he's back in that mood from the start of the race where he was charging on through, and it's just so much more hooked up. And we have had confirmation from Jamie, who has been down in the paddock, that from Posma it was the case that his actual monitor went off, so those technical issues, and that's why we saw him have that moment where he went to the wall. I don't think it was the case that he actually knew where he was driving out on circuit, which is a horrible place to be, and I can tell you from personal experience from my own sim race, and I have had the television put itself into standby mode with only 5 minutes of a race left, and well, a frantic scramble to try and find the TV remote, and that can happen as sim racers. We don't have the real world upsets per se with regards to the engine switching off, but we do have those technical moments which can frustrate us just as much. Meanwhile, Patrick Gannon having none of those such moments.
Yeah, touch wood. In fact, tell a lie, I did have one hardware failure on the 24-hour in Le Mans. Literally jumped in the car, Mulsanne straight to the first like sort of bus stop, and my steering wheel decided not to work, and I went straight into the barrier, into the. It's just the worst feeling in the world, and it's even worse when you're in an endurance race. Obviously, this one, all the drivers are single drivers, but when you go into the 6 hours, you're part of a team event. So if it happens in a team event, as we see Patrick there taking a lot of curb coming there through turn number 10, just unsettling the car slightly. But yeah, just. It's even worse when you're part of a team, because you feel for yourself, but you also feel for the rest of the team. Certainly if it's to the tail end of whatever endurance race you're in.
Oh, indeed. And as we ride on board here, Patrick Gannon, and really run on board for a good portion of lap, the RPM Racing driver here going all in, despite the fact that he has not got long to go. He's just got under half an hour remaining, but he's putting in laps right now as if his life is dependent on them. I think he wants to see just how much is in the car. Well, he's going to have a bit of a problem here. He has got a GT3 who is running through the bus stop chicane. This is the one place you do not want to catch that traffic, but he'll go around Timothy Bray, and as they make their way around turn number 5 there, Gannon using the downforce available on the LMP2 machine to take that outside overtake before rolling his way down into turn number 6, really biting at the steering wheel there to get it into the apex. And as he makes his way up into toe corner here, well, up into 5th, down to 3rd once again, down to 2nd mid-apex, using that downshift there to get some extra rotation, but the car understeering on him on power exit there, and that, I think, is a sign that Gannon is starting to find where the car can go swimmingly and where it's the case that the car's just not quite there anymore in terms of the available grip as he comes through the hill corner as well. And wouldn't you agree, Andy? I think it's one of those cases where Gannon is sort of seeing here it's the case the car just does not have the grip, and he's understeering quite a lot and almost puts it in the wall there.
Yeah, definitely just pushing that car to the limits, and these are the good events for the drivers to find out where the actual limits of the car. But what is good for our viewers to look at is the speed difference between the GT3s and these LMP2 cars. The corners come at you so quickly, you can brake so much later, and we can see here literally that Mercedes was halfway down that start finish, and Patrick there caught him before the first corner. But these cars are just they're just on rails really, and it's more down to, like I said, the stuff outside, like the tyre wear, that really affects how these cars handle. But the speed difference is it's just phenomenal. It's pretty much the same between the LMP1 and the LMP2, the speed difference, but a lot of races you do find these LMP2 cars with coupled with the GT3, which I think is a really good match between the two cars. I think they're well suited out on the track.
Oh, most definitely. And as Patrick Gannon rides his way on through it, Kenneth McGrath, who we were wondering earlier whether he would be able to catch up Gannon, given the fact that he decided not to take that tyre change, where it's the case McGrath is gradually falling away. Those lap times on average here, 9 tenths of a second to a whole second, that McGrath is losing a lap. Every 10th counts out on this circuit, and indeed FindingSpeed.com will tell you more about that on this event hosted by FindingSpeed. And the case right now, Kenneth McGrath trying to just simply bring that car home, whereas Gannon is looking for every which way limit. And I think at this point, Gannon, once he gets about a 20-second gap, may suddenly feel that he's comfortable, as McGrath here also diving to the inside down to heel past Timothy Bray there. And again, giving us another example of how the LMP2 class drivers are just able to be really aggressive on the brakes and come through, as we see P3 man Corey Cook here from Guardian Esports, and will currently a lap down on McGrath, but still going strong and running at a relatively consistent pace.
I mean, obviously, it was a bit unfortunate that Corey got involved with that incident coming up through the S's that really put paid to his race. But it's good to see that he decided to go back to the pits and just come out. I mean, it's all good information and all good stuff going forward for the 6-hour race, and he's certainly got the speed when we look at his lap times compared to the front runners. He is on par with Kenneth McGrath's speed of consistency of lap time. So a 1:36.5 was Kenneth's last lap time, and 1:36.2 was Corey's. So he's certainly got the speed to keep up with the front drivers, and it's all again about that traffic management. You've just got to anticipate. Sometimes it's hard, I know, anticipate what these GT3 cars are going to do. And as it's always said, any race is that, you know, GT3s, just keep on your line and we'll get around you. But you do find these GT3 cars flicking across the road and trying to get out of the way. So you've almost got to have a second brain in your head, just figuring out what these GT3 drivers are going to do. And that's probably the more taxing bit about driving these LMP2 cars, is understanding the slower. They're almost like rolling chicanes around the track. So you've got all these rolling chicanes that you've got to overcome, as well as try to make sure that you try and keep your pace. And where you hit these rolling chicanes of these GT3 cars is important to make sure that you don't lose too much time.
Oh, indeed. And speaking of those rolling chicanes, we're looking at the second place rolling chicane in the GT3 class. That is Wayne Castile here. And, well, he won't be thinking about being a chicane to LMPs right now. He'll be thinking about trying to close those lap times to Fletcher. And that last lap from Castile at 45.8 versus a 44.8 from Fletcher. It does seem as though Castile, and over the last couple of laps, in fact, his last lap was only a tenth of what Fletcher said. That advocacy for taking those fresher tyres really shown by Mark Fletcher, and Castile also feeling the benefit. I think Fletcher in this race just in a bit of a world of his own, and Castile just does not quite have that edge to come back at him as that gap just keeps inching open. But Castile comfortably ahead of P3 man Timothy Bray.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see now if Mark Fletcher does come into the pits or has actually clicked it down a few on the fuel mapping to try and save that fuel, because he did come in on 56 minutes, so under the magic hour marker. So to be able to do that 2-stop or the 1-stop in this race, he's going to need to do some mega fuel saving, but it's probably not really going to benefit him in this race if he's going to do something different in this race than he would do in the 6 hours, because this is all about gearing up for that 6-hour Watkins Glen race next week. So it'd be interesting to see if Mark Fletcher has saved enough fuel under normal conditions, or he's going to have to come in to make a splash and dash, because we would expect him in, I think, around about 49 to 50 minutes, I think, if he hasn't fuel saved at all on this second stint.
Oh, indeed, and that is a very good point there, Andy. We may see some last-ditch dashes through the pits, and that will be a concern as well. And but it is part of that simulation for the 6-hour event next week. As we look here to Scott Angelo, who are now in a bit of a no man's land. He's up to P4. He is a lap ahead of Hedgecock, but he's also the best part of about 30 seconds off of Timothy Bray. As we do look to Adam Hedgecock here, the Alfred Esports driver, running quite comfortably at the moment. He does have a 14, almost a 15-second advantage over Alex Persian. And in terms of the lap times, Hedgecock actually closing down Scott Angelo quite aggressively at the moment in terms of the times, but he's got a long way to go, and there is a 17-second gap that he's got to bring it down to try and go for that potential move for P4. He is closing it. We'll have to wait and see. He's got some time left yet, although I don't think Angelo is losing 4 seconds lap every lap. Well, surely not.
No, you wouldn't have thought so. Just looking down the incidents thing, it looks like Brandon Levert has had a crash. It looks like a very strange one. It looks like he left the pit lane and maybe got caught up in an incident. And if by magic, hopefully this is what we'll see. We'll see what happened here with Brandon. Is that coming up through the S's here? Yeah, you can see the car. He just loses it. No, that's turn number 9 there. He comes up, just slightly loses there, so not a major crash. Just saw a red crash coming along our timing, so not quite a crash, maybe a little mistake. But yeah, a lot of drivers now succumbing to the tyre temperature. I mean, 49 degrees is just astronomical on track, and the drivers who haven't taken tyres have really, I mean, you can just see down the timing tower, Paul, the difference in speed. The ones that have taken the tyres have got doing like 147s, the ones that haven't are doing like 151s. I mean, that's just a massive fall off, isn't it?
Oh, indeed, it is a huge fall off. And when you're in that situation with so little time left in the race as well, you're counting down the clock and you'll see that it only says there's 14 minutes to go. And you'll be thinking to yourself, do I really want to come in when I'm that close? But every time you take a corner now, you're literally, it's almost as if you're dancing on ice skates, which is a weird contradiction given we're talking about a hot circuit, but now we're talking about what you normally use to slide around on a very cold surface. But it's the case, the car will just feel so sketchy. The tyres will not give you that grip, and it's almost as if you have to second guess the car, which as a racing driver you do not want to do. You want the car to respond to the feel and touch when you're behind the wheel, and that is the challenge right now in terms of those who did not take the tyres. They just got to try and eke the car out a little bit more, but they're losing so much time in doing so. Alternatively, if they try to push that lap time, they're going to be driving on the very limit, and it only takes one tiny error, as we've seen so many times here, Andy, and it's all over. You're into that wall, and these walls here are unforgiving given how close they are.
Yes, that certainly is. It's like the Russian roulette, isn't it? You're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. You know, you've got to really look at how you're performing. You know, and I think the biggest thing that you got to think of is yourself. Am I confident in this car? Can I deliver it to the end, or do I feel that it's too much of an issue, that there's a possibility that I could, you know, lose it at the last minute here? And that's probably the $1 million question when driving around these cars, you know. And losing one place is probably better than crashing the car out and basically putting yourself out of the race. But as all of us are sort of racing drivers, we don't want to admit defeat, and we don't want to admit that we're wrong, so we probably just push it to the end anyway. But these are the questions that, you know, the team behind the driver is the ones that really need to make that decision. You know, take it away from the driver and say, look, you know, yeah, let's lose a position, but let's bring it home in the top 5, top 10, whatever position you're in. And that's where the team ethos really comes into play with the endurance racing.
Oh, indeed, I'd agree with you there, and that's why at the end of the day they say it's a team effort, and it's so true, because if you're out there by yourself as a driver, your focus is on trying to do your best lap in, lap out, and sometimes you can't necessarily see clearly, unlike the team can. And Patrick Gannon, for example, he's been pushing so hard, the leader of the LMP2 class, and Mark Fletcher, the leader of the GT3 class, and the two of them having just shared the same bit of track for a brief period of time, with Gannon now going off into the distance in the LMP2 as per the normal schedule. But we can see it is the case that right now they're just just focusing on delivering those laps and letting the team who they're working with help with those strategic calls. And it just gives you that comfort as a driver, because you can think, you know what, place the trust in the team. And well, there can always be those arguments, as we've seen in real world motorsport, and indeed there's been many in sim racing motorsport as well, whether the team's right to call you in, but you have to have that faith. And Mark Fletcher definitely having that faith in the car and the team working around him.
Yeah, definitely is. And he's done an exceptional job today. He's been the class at the top of the field for the GT3 is Mark Fletcher. Got a little bit of pressure at the start of the race, overcame that, then got onto the back of Castile and sort of like almost blew him away when got past him. Different in strategy. Castile didn't take tyres. Obviously, Fletcher did take tyres, and I think really as Castile will probably admit, is that it's probably a wrong call to not take the tyres, but you can't give it away from Mark Fletcher's pace. It has just been electric. It's literally metronomical, the way that he's just putting in these 1:45 lap times, lap after lap after lap, you know, and that's just a sign of a great racer, to be able to keep consistent speed up, and you know, consistency wins races.
Oh, indeed, and he's just delivering non-stop. The man is a machine, and well, it is the case that right now, as he makes his way down into what is once again there the hill corner and heads up the hill, just looking solid now and not too far to go. And Castile gradually falling back, but to be fair, that tyre change has worked out for Castile in terms of giving him that data to know that taking the tyre change in these hot conditions, a very valuable switch. And we look to the P2 driver here, and to be fair, he's been up and down the order to a degree, but I think he'll be very happy with this. He has had to play a bit of a gamble on the strategy, and it didn't work out, but he did, in a way, I think he was quite chivalrous in the fact that he peeled into the pitch just as Fletcher was getting ready to go for the move and said to him, you know, I concede defeat. It's the case that staying on that one set of tyres was not the way to go here today, and I think he's owned his race very well. I think he's accepted that P2 was what it was going to be, and he hasn't looked back.
Yeah, or on the other hand, he could say, well, at least you didn't pass me out on track. It was in the pits. So it's the two ways of thinking this. But also, for you know, what we've got to take into account is this is a brand new car to iRacing. Literally came out this week. Wayne's got into it. Obviously, Mark Fletcher's probably, you know, really used to that BMW. This car, brand new, he's come out and literally he's tried to stick it to Mark Fletcher in that BM, and has done an exceptional job. You know, only once you get used to the idiosyncrasies of each of the different cars and the abilities that each of the cars have, you know, once Wayne gets used to it, and this will be like valuable information for him in this sort of environment in a race as competitive as it has been in a brand new car, you know, with time he's only going to get faster, and he's only going to understand the car a lot better. So, you know, for all the Mercedes drivers, and I think probably half the field is Mercedes and Ferraris, but you know, with his just taking this brand new car out and giving it a go, and I think a lot of drivers are liking this new setup. It sounds fantastic, though.
Oh, indeed, it does. It sounds absolutely fantastic. And, well, whilst the sound of the engine doesn't really give you any actual additional time out of the circuit, improves your lap time as we ride on board here. I think Jamie in the camera room right now, knowing that we want to hear that lovely V8 once again. And in fact, I'm just going to go silent for a brief moment so we can appreciate it. Absolute bliss to the ears, wouldn't you agree, Andy?
It is. It's just got such a distinct sound, hasn't it? I mean, it's almost like a pleasurable to drive around in it. You know, you haven't got music blaring in the background, but you just got the sound of that engine note. It's just amazing. Just love the sound of it. I love the sound of the old one, and I'm really happy with what iRacing have done with the sound of the new one. It just sounds amazing. So good job iRacing for putting a little bit of time and effort to getting the true sound of what these cars sound like in real life. So great addition to what is a very hotly contested GT3 lineup.
Oh, indeed. But as we just come away from talking about the sounds of motorsport to a little bit of strategy on circuit, Mark Fletcher has just recently dipped into the pit. A very quick stop, only an 8-second stop. He's still leading in the GT3 class, and I suspect that may be a very quick splash and dash. Perhaps he's realised, you know what, I can't make that fuel tank go the full distance, but he's brought it in, and in doing so, as Patrick Gannon also into the pits right at the end, just that last-minute dash to the pits for fuel.
Yeah, it definitely is. Well, that's what we thought was going to happen anyway. You know, we didn't think Mark had enough fuel, and these LMPs, as we said, the fuel tanks are not exactly the biggest one. But this strategy where you've got to come in for the splash and dash are the ones where you can lose the race, as we see Kenneth here just going into P1 for the first time in a long time. So exactly there, you know, Patrick has decided he hasn't got enough fuel to get in, been pushing it, and you've got Kenneth McGrath, who hasn't taken tyres, so was naturally slower, which would naturally save you a bit more fuel, has managed to leapfrog Patrick into first place, and we've only got 6 minutes left of this race to do. So if Patrick wants to get that P1 position back, 5.4 seconds behind, he's really got to push now. But these are the dying edge strategies of endurance racing we're seeing here on screen ahead of us.
Oh, indeed. It's going to be close now with only 5.5 minutes on the clock, plus also the final lap. Can Patrick Gannon from RPM Racing close back up to Kenneth McGrath from Snowman and make the pass? I mean, right now he is closing very quickly. We haven't even come to the end of his outlap, and he's already stripped a whole second out of Kenneth McGrath as they make the way now in towards the final couple of corners to complete this lap, and then they will have approximately 4 more to go if my quick maths estimation is correct. But Gannon really trying to exert as much out the car as they run through it, and there is Kenneth McGrath, and it has not been helped by the fact he's come behind some GT3 class traffic in probably the worst possible place you can catch it, and that is coming out of the boot loop and back onto the main section before the end of the lap. And what do you reckon, Andy? Will it be the case that he's passed or not? As actually Kenneth McGrath into the pit, so we're not going to see that battle.
Oh, what a shame. You know, unfortunately, Kenneth has decided that he didn't have enough. I bet that heart in the mouth moment from Patrick was thinking, oh no, don't say I've lost this race in the last 5 minutes of it for not having enough fuel. But obviously Kenneth unfortunately didn't have enough either, so a little bit of splash and dash. But this is all valuable information for the team to fully understand how long each of these stints can go, and if they can eke out them extra laps earlier on, will maybe stop them having to do this splash and dash at the end. So, you know, these races for the drivers and the teams are so valuable in gaining the information ahead of the larger races that's coming up next week. And 6 hours is a long old race, but 2 hour stints is pretty much what the drivers will be doing. So it's all good practice for each one of these drivers.
Oh, most definitely. And McGrath going on now to run to the end in P2, at least that will be his full process as he makes man through, but takes a lot of apex curve. They're going into the bus stop chicane, almost getting airborne there, and he won't want to be doing that over the last couple of laps, guys. All that hard work will be in vain. But we are gradually closing out the time here at Watkins Glen. Not long to go. A very hot Watkins Glen circuit here today. And as McGrath makes his way through, Mark Fletcher leading with an advantage of 16 seconds. That quick splash and dash has seen him come back out comfortably ahead of Wayne Castile, albeit Fletcher at this point, I think, just cruising to the end. He is still taking half a second advantage each and every lap over Castile, but as he makes his way down, we praised him earlier, talking about the fact that he's been absolutely flawless since the start of this race, and a lot of data going on in as well with regards to his performance, and Castile the same in P2. And really, these two have been a little bit of a world of their own. But as Fletcher now with 3 minutes on the clock, and we look to Timothy Bray here, the team upstate driver. It's been the case, Andy, he's been in a lot of battles, but I think being on the last step of the podium here is a very well deserved result.
It certainly is. I mean, he seems to be in a lot of thick of it throughout this race, and has done an exceptional job. Obviously, once he got away from, I think it was Alex Persian that he overtook for that third place, he's pretty much made it his own, and just got stronger and stronger as the race has gone on. So really good racing there from Timothy Bray in the Team Upstate BMW car, and has just really cemented it. I mean, you can see now he's in no man's land. He's well behind Castile in second place, but more importantly, he is well ahead of Angelo in fourth place. But wow, I was just looking at the temperatures here now, Paul. 51 degrees. I mean, it's gone up 11 degrees from where they started the race. I mean, it's got to be like an ice rink.
Oh, goodness me, I would agree with you there. And definitely, we can feel it radiating off of the tarmac as we see Patrick Gannon here coming on through. And based on the lap time here, I think it will be the case he's now coming through to go on to the final lap. The white flag will be out here with 1.5 minutes to go. There's a white flag being waved by Barry, our flag man. And now Patrick Gannon only has one more tour of the circuit to get to the end. And now it's all about just simply nursing the car through to the very end as he makes his way through turn 1 and up towards the bus stop chicane. And, well, in your experience, Andy, it's the case when you're on that final lap in the lead, bit of pressure on you still because you know you've got one more to go.
There is, but you can also, the good thing is if you've got a decent, healthy lead, like you can see here now with Patrick flashing the lights there saying, you know, job well done, is that you can sort of almost relax because you're almost there. But like you say, don't relax too much because, as you said before, it's never over until you pass that checker flag. Anything could happen out on track, but almost like a victory lap here for Patrick Gannon. Has driven this race to perfection. He is up 3 places from where he started on the grid, so it wasn't the quickest qualifier out track, but it's just been consistent. After the first couple of laps with the incidents with the LMPs, managed to get to the front of the grid and has pretty much stayed there for the roundabout probably an hour and 40 minutes of this race. We saw briefly Kenneth taking the lead for his one lap of glory, but nobody can take it away from this man. Patrick Gannon has driven this LMP2 car with perfection out on track. A couple of little tiny mistakes to maybe put right for next week, but a great victory for Patrick Gannon in the top of the LMP2 field.
Oh, indeed, as he crosses the line and takes the checker flag, it is RPM Racing's Patrick Gannon who comes home the winner overall, and in the LMP2 class, I should say. He'll feel as though he's driven like a pro today, and he'll be very happy with that. As meanwhile, Kenneth McGrath here, P2 in the class, coming on through and really took the fight to Gannon as best as he could. Decided to play it with the strategy as well. He tried every avenue to get ahead. He led for a lap, and he will take that as a little bit of a feather in his cap. And as he makes his way through the final 2 corners here, the Snowman driver will complete the podium, given the fact that Cook has already come across P3, being that lap down, and McGrath takes the checkered flag. And now wait for a winner in the GT3 class, and will Mark Fletcher, our leader at the moment, not a confirmed winner until he gets that checkered flag. We've already had Timothy Bray come across the line in P3. Castile is 24 seconds behind Fletcher, who is the focus of our cameraman's attention. And as Fletcher rolls his way through the last couple of corners here, I think for him it'll be the sign that the preparation work is going very well for the official 6 hours of Watkins Glen in a weekend's time. And well, he's done the job today. He's done what he needed to, which was that solid qualifying performance, and it's translated into a dominant win. So as he comes through the final corner, Mark Fletcher from Altitude Esports is your winner in what is the GT3 class. He crosses the line here, taking the win, a comfortable win. And now we do wait for Wayne Castile to come through, and here's the Mercedes driver, and Andy, a solid drive from Castile as he comes onto his end.
Yeah, it's been a great race. The field hasn't been massive, 25 drivers, but we've been entertained for the last 2 hours with some exceptional racing out on track. Some really close throughout the whole field. You know, even for 9th place in the GT3, and this front battle for the GT3 win has been exceptional as well. But you can't take it away from Mark Fletcher. I mean, he's just been dominant all race. Castile put up a little bit of a fight to him, and it'll be great information for him about the brand new car. But he's done an exceptional job. But what a great race.
Oh, indeed. And as I think one of our drivers doing some donuts there on the runoff at turn 1, here are the race results, or they'll be appearing very shortly in the Finding Speed Gaggle at the Glen Community Race. And we can see that in the LMP2 class, Patrick Gannon, in the end, your winner overall and in class by 38.5 seconds ahead of Kenneth McGrath. The 2 of them finishing on the lead lap, and then Corey Cook, the last of the drivers to finish the race a lap down. We have the retirements of Brett Accord and also Kwok Noon. And then we come to our GT3 result results here very shortly. And as they appear on the screen, it is the case that Mark Fletcher taking the win up by 27.8 seconds ahead of Wayne Castile. And then the rest of the drivers finishing at least a lap down. Timothy Brave rounding off the podium with Scott Angelo and Adam Hedgecock completing the top 5. Then Alex Persian finishing P6, Baron Glover P7, Brian Hoffman P8. And then it was the case, I do believe, Dan Okarazana coming home in P9, Cameron Caldwell P10. I do believe that was a retirement for Caldwell, with also Alexander Posber, Austin Dills, Brandon Lavier, Callum Puddicombe, also Chris Gooch, Alan Mystic, Brad Crouch, and also Martin Tijoff, all having retirements over the course of the race. A very attrition rate based race here at the Glen. And well, Andy, if we had to summarise this race in a few words, what would it be?
Amazing.
Oh, indeed. Oh, if you had to put it in a single word, amazing. But I think
just
we have.
one word.
Oh, indeed. But I think we've got time for one or two post-race interviews. And, well, who have we got available here, Andy?
So let's go with the second place in the GT trophy, which I think it is. Wayne, welcome to the commentary box. I mean, great race there. How was it for you, and how was that weather for you?
It definitely messed with me. I had a game plan going in that I was going to fuel save as much as I possibly can. And with that track temperature coming up, it kind of foiled my plan. I had to pit for a left front tire towards the end, or else I was going to make it with a one-stop race. So I had it planned out perfectly, and then I started getting the warnings for a tire, and unfortunately that led Mark to get back around me, and I just couldn't hold him off.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we were looking at it. There was very much different strategies between yourself and Mark out front of the GT3 class. And we did see that you didn't take tyres, but you managed to eke out past that magical hour marker for fuel saving for the second race. Has this given you valuable information going into the 6 hours next weekend?
Yeah, because it's going to be very similar conditions. So basically now I know that at a minimum we're 2 tires on the left. Every pit stop is going to be key, especially in this car. I'm not entirely sure if it affects the same way in the other cars because we haven't tried them with the BOP. But yeah, basically just 2 left sides and keep on trucking for the 6 hour.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, how have you found the new car anyway, being it's only been a week out on iRacing?
It is absolutely fantastic. Daniel Morad of Moradness is actually one of the guys that helped build this car because he races it in the IMSA WeatherTech series. So it is, from what he's told me, as close to the real thing as you can possibly get. So if the real car drives anywhere near as good as this car does, then it's mind-blowing how good of a car it is. It really is a magical thing. Hopefully the other GT3s get to this kind of standard because it's just fantastic to drive.
Well, that's always great, and a great race today. Before we let you go, Wayne, is there anybody you'd like to give a shout out to?
Yeah, obviously Daniel Morad of Moradness, him and Stu for their coaching. That's a great thing that I've reached out to them for, and they have helped my race game tenfold. So without them, I wouldn't have even gotten close to P2 today.
Well, congratulations on your P2 and good luck for the actual event next week.
I appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. So there we have that was Wayne Castile giving us an insight into the brand new Mercedes. So over to you, Paul.
Well, I think having heard from our second place finish in the GT3 class, it's only courtesy we hear from our winner in the GT3 class, Mark Fletcher. And as we bring him in to the commentary box here, Mark, it looked as though it was absolutely precision perfect out there on the circuit today at the Watkins Glen. Of course, this being the build up to the official iRacing event in a week's time, it's a ×3 distance, but not the wrong step in the perfect race for you.
Yeah, it was pretty good. I realised, well, Hedge, my teammate, worked out that he could stop the race. By the time that we worked that out, I was way too far into the stint and pitted with 50% left on my tyres. So took the dash early to change tyres and then, save a bit of fuel, see what Wayne was going to do. And then, he came into the pits. And I was like, right, I've got to push now, try and get that gap so I could do my stuff and go.
Oh, indeed. And in building that gap, we saw in the BMW M4, the BMW M4 known for being a straight line monster in the past, but it seems as though the new kid on the block, the Mercedes AMG 2020 machine, is quite taking the run on the straights to the BMW. How did that play out in regards to your race today?
Yeah, because I started the I started the race without my spotter on, so yeah, that's why I got bought to it at the start. And yeah, to be fair, that the car, they were really closely matched actually. I think the 6 hours is going to be really interesting. I think there's going to be a massive spread of cars, but yeah, the new Merc certainly a force to be reckoned with, which is good.
Oh, indeed. And with regards to the strategies, of course, gaining data today as well as wanting to take that win. What would you say, having driven for 2 hours now at the Watkins Glen, what's going to be the biggest consideration when you go into the official 6-hour race?
Track temp. Generally, a big shout out to Eddie Purcell in my stream, and also Brian Loynes and Kirsty for being the old strategy, because Eddie said, he was like, that those tires are going to go. There's no way that you can run 2 hours on a set of tires. I was unsure about it, but yeah, it's all about track temp, because it's going to get very hot indeed.
Oh, indeed. Well, we were sweating in the commentary, but I can tell you that even with the air conditioning. But just before we let you go, is there anybody you'd like to give a shout out to live on air?
Yeah, just all my guys at Altitude Esports and our team sponsors. We've got Ace Tech Sim Sports. Here we go. Freem, Sim Racing Studios, a big one to Sim Stickers. FindingSpeed, obviously Russell drives for Altitude Esports and helps out with our sort of promotion. And Mr. Hedge for doing all our pictures, and Callum for doing all of our socials.
Oh, well, I'm sure they'll all appreciate the shout-outs in kind. Indeed, quite the list there to go through, Mark. But with that, congratulations on taking the win today, and we wish you all the best of luck for the official event in a week's time.
Perfect. Thanks, Paul. Cheers for streaming it. Appreciate it.
Take care. So we're hearing there from Mark Fletcher, our winner from Altitude Esports in the GT3 class. I think that is it for our post-race interviews today. But Andy, I asked you earlier to sum up what was the racing at Watkins Glen, but definitely a major consideration with regards to that track temperature for next weekend.
That's going to be a big major concern for every competitor that does start that 6-hour race, is the track temperature here in Watkins Glen. We can see that in this 2 hours that we've been broadcasting this, the track temperature has gone up 12 degrees from where we started the race. So it's going to be a real big factor to anybody wanting to win this 6-hour race.
Oh, indeed. And on that note, I think that's all we've got time for today here, ladies and gentlemen, at the Watkins Glen. This has been the Gaggle at the Glen, as brought to you by FindingSpeed in collaboration with Apex Racing TV. Of course, in a week's time, there will be the official iRacing event, the 6 hours of Watkins Glen Endurance. And for everybody signing up and taking part in that, we wish you the best luck. But even if you're tuning in to broadcast, it's going to be fast and frantic racing action. And today has been an indicator of that. So for myself in the commentary booth, it's goodbye from me, Paul Walsh, and Andy, it's goodbye for yourself.
Goodbye.
And we are dialing out, and thank you very much for tuning in, ladies and gentlemen.